Slightly past the appointed hour, but we're all here. This is Thursday, October 12th, the Scituate Planning Board meeting, and we have an agenda that was posted. Do we have a second on it?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, let's get started tonight. First of all, I just wanted to recognize that we have our newest Board of Selectmen here, Karen Canfield, and I understand you're going to be the liaison to the planning board, so welcome, and thank you very much for your support, and please extend our thanks to all of the Board of Selectmen for their support in the past in working with the planning board. First up on our agenda tonight is the continued public hearing for the residential cluster special permit for Seaside at Scituate. And I note that we have sort of set up here a PowerPoint presentation. What I would like to do with that, we just received this. I don't really want to go through a 20-minute presentation on it. But what I'd like to do is sort of walk through the open items from the last sets of meetings that we've had and kind of where we are, establish where we are. To the extent that something in here is responsive to one of those items, then I would ask you to, at that point, just bring it up at that point in time.
Sure.
And we'll get through as much as we can, and then if there's anything sort of left that we haven't seen yet, we can address it at that time.
If you want, Dave can just give very briefly a 5-minute thing so you can see what's in there. So then, inside a substantive thing, you can do that. But just by way of introduction, Bill Laurenberger, I'm here with Jeff DeLisi. To my right is Dave Bauer, our divisional president. Scott Michelli, our engineer for Toll Brothers. Dave Buckley, project manager. I also have with us tonight Kevin Klein from Stantec, who's our stormwater engineer. I also have Jim Ash, who's our LSP environmental consultant. I have Mark Manganello, who is our wetland specialist. Aaron Fredette, who's our traffic engineer, and Paul Marabito, who's also our engineer. But
Great. I would say, why don't we try to get through our agenda the way we've had it. We have it established, and we'll look at the PowerPoint as we go. I'd rather not take the time. We have to stop at 9. We have another item on the agenda at 9 o'clock. I'd like to get through as much as we can.
okay.
And keep moving forward. And then as we get to 10 minutes of 9 or whatever it is, if you think it would be an appropriate time to stop and maybe do the 5-minute complete walkthrough, we can do it at that point in time. So we have a number of open items and issues that we've been carrying over from the last couple of meetings here, and there's been a lot of work that's happened in between. I think our last meeting was August 24th. Let's start, and we have Janet Bernardo here from Horsley Witten as well. Just raise your hand there so everybody can see it. Thanks. And so Horsley Witten has had an opportunity to, I think, go back and forth with your experts as well. And I'd like to start out with individual topics. We'll find out where we are, what things are left open at this point, and then move on to the next. And let's start out with the stormwater report and kind of where things stand at this point in time. Maybe Janet, you could give us kind of a brief update.
Yeah, sure. Briefly, we met with Stantec came and Kevin Klein came and talked to me at Horsley Witten's office, and we kind of reviewed the concept of what was going on with the plan. The stormwater design, as it stands, basically meets the Mass Stormwater standards, but the basins are very large, and the Conservation Commission has asked to have the design changed slightly, which would be to possibly add more runoff going into the wetlands, which at the moment, what the standards say is that you cannot increase the runoff to the wetlands or off property. Conservation is kind of saying, we want some of the water to go to the wetlands to make sure that they're viable, and they also wanted to have a little bit more water going under the culvert to Scituate Brook.
Scituate,
Did I
yeah.
get that right? So the idea is that the stormwater can be redesigned to make that happen, but it has not been redesigned at this time. So what will eventually, once all of the particulars are decided with the wetlands and with the roadway design and with some of the other pieces, that will change the stormwater design. Then the stormwater will be redesigned, and at that time, I do think that, you know, you want to have somebody, you know, of course, I suppose, do a complete review of it again and make sure that it meets the standards, as well as the inverts are right, the pipe sizes are correct, all the technical pieces are there. And they do meet it now, but they're very, very large basins, and it, you know, to save some wood, to save some wetland area, it might be nice to try to reduce those down if the Conservation Commission is kind of looking for that as well.
Okay. So you would suggest that at this point, we hold off any other kinds of detailed
it's not
review
really
until
a
we
point
get
to.
through
I mean,
all these other open
They
items?
submitted some lengthy letters, including the stormwater. But, and so I want to go through, we only received it 2 weeks ago, like on October 5th. So I wanted to give you something today for a week ago, so, but I didn't want to go through all of the stormwater and check. I haven't gone through all the letters point by point, which I will be providing you with something that basically hits every point from what we said originally, what the response was, and if their response was adequate, if we question it in some way. But for now, what I wanted to give you was, this is some of the things that are outstanding. The stormwater has not been fully redesigned, and so when it is redesigned, we'll look at it at that stage.
Okay. Is that it on stormwater? I think I also, from your last note, saw that you just pointed out that the roof downspouts need to be discharged.
Oh, yeah, I wanted to
Perimeter
make
drain.
sure that when they do redesign the stormwater, that some of the roof runoffs, we had a conversation about where the roof runoffs were going. Some of them have perimeter drains that basically tie all of the roof runoff into one of the basins or another. Some of them we couldn't quite tell. So it looks like it's gonna sheet flow off to the grass, but maybe it's gonna go to the driveway. My feeling is that it should not just have a gutter and a downspout directly to the driveway, which would then go to a catch basin, because then you're just adding dirty water to clean
Okay.
water. So that was just
So we'll-
when the design happens.
So we'll address that at kind of final design.
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
Just to clarify, so there's no misunderstanding, I think there's a little miscommunication here, is we are not redesigning the stormwater. And the reason for that is I thought at the last meeting, or before the last meeting, went over this, is simple. Basically, your bylaw doesn't allow it. That's the issue, is the stormwater bylaw has no waiver provision. So you cannot do what it is, albeit meritorious, that it may be to add some more water, that you can't do it. The stormwater
Right.
prohibits it.
I do think we had that conversation, and my understanding is we're going to maintain, at a minimum, maintain the flow to Scituate Brook
Yes,
that exists today.
right.
I don't know if the current design does
Yeah,
that
the
or
current
not.
design, yeah. So in other
Um,
words, there's no misconception, that we're not waiting for a redesign of this, the design we have.
Oh, yeah, I guess I didn't understand it that way, because I read their letter as it hadn't been redesigned yet, but it would be at some stage, so maybe that was my misunderstanding, but that's how I read it.
Okay. I kind of, as I read this, the redesign I'm thinking of is that things may change and move around here, and we want to make sure we get everything done, and then have the final stormwater design match what you finally plan to build.
Correct, but I think,
Right.
Kevin, you can speak, is there any substantive changes?
Yeah,
Let's move it around. What is that?
Okay.
what we're doing right now is we've added the sidewalks and done some modifications, which does affect the stormwater. So we're
Right.
recalculating all the areas.
Mhm.
In addition to that, we're rebalancing the site, so we can try and direct as much stormwater as possible to the south, towards wetland AB, which goes to the Scituate Brook, and away from Hatherley. So that, we're in the process right now of rebalancing it. We're
Mhm.
not redesigning the basins themselves, but trying to get more towards the southerly side of the site. It gets it away from the east and Hadley. It also gets it back to where we're trying to maintain flow.
So you're incorporating sidewalks, rebalancing it. If any other changes are identified, you would adjust
We
accordingly?
adjusted, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So that sounds to me like there is sort of a final tweak on the
Oh,
design.
there
Yeah.
definitely is.
Okay.
We're in the process right now of
Right.
doing the stormwater report to go with this.
Okay,
And in the front end, the entrance area where we've got big swale, by rebalancing, we're reducing that too. So it's all being done at this, right now.
okay,
Hey, Pat.
yes,
Pat.
Bill.
No, Pat, where's,
Hi, Steve,
Yes,
before
Pat.
we get off stormwater, what came up?
I'm not ready to get off it yet.
All right. What came up at the conservation meeting was that if there was a way that we could maybe increase supply of Scituate brook, that would be, a favorable thing. But under the state law and the bylaw, you really have to capture all the stormwater on site. And one of the questions that came up, I don't know if Janet had been aware of this, was there is some flow coming from the north from street drainage, and there are pipes coming onto the site, which may be an additional amount of water that's on the site. Could that amount of water be directed toward Scituate Brook? Because you wouldn't be taking stormwater that's falling on the site and directing it. It would be some other water, and in the wash, some could come and some could go, and, that was one thing. I don't know if that's possible. And I don't think it would be a major change to the stormwater structures or anything, but it would be.
So you're saying that stormwater that's flowing from off property onto property, you want to try to redirect?
I'll just look into it. I don't know if that's possible. It was just a question that came up. It's not a roadblock. It's just, if we still have the goal of putting the water into Scituate Brook, is that one way to do it? But I don't know if Janet, if that's something that.
It's a little tricky.
Yeah,
That's not a immediate, oh yeah, sure, you can do that.
right.
It's definitely, it makes it hard to prove that that's what's happened when you're taking it from one end and then sending it off the other end. Because I assume you're not just gonna pipe it all the way around, and
Yeah,
I guess they could be creative design, but I'm not willing to say yes or no.
Pat, was the concept that those existing flows would be redirected? So they wouldn't be
No,
on the property?
Just equalize, like if some is flowing to the north end of the site, that continues to flow there, but you calculate how much is coming there, and then maybe that amount could leave from the south end of the site into Scituate. It was only because, one of the goals was to look at Scituate, try and help it, but it
Right.
doesn't have to happen. It was just a question, is that something that we may want to think about?
And typically, what the analysis needs to show is wherever the water is coming now is how it should balance out in the end. So whatever's flowing off-site should continue to flow off-site in the same manner. So unfortunately, if it's flowing on the site and then staying on the site, we can't just say it's gonna go off. But if it is currently kind of, in one sense, getting off property, that flow can continue to go off property, and they can design it in that manner. So that's something that they can look at. They don't have to hold every single drop of water on the property.
Right, I think the idea was it can't increase the volume of flow
Right.
off
Or the
the,
flow, right.
off the
Volume.
property perimeter, if you will, nor
Right.
the velocity, right?
Right.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
David Bauer with Toll Brothers. Just to give some context to this conversation, one of the reasons that you've known or heard of us for more than 2 years now is that we've been trying to tackle the stormwater on this property and trying to tackle the water that's being released onto the property from the town's land. And we've gone through major iterations of engineering and spent a lot of money to deal with that water, and that's in our design. And we don't want to have that water now be the cause for redesign. We are essentially done with this design. We're making some final tweaks, and we'll submit the final version of that design later this month. And we don't anticipate further changes, subject to, peer review of what we submit later this month. So from our perspective, any notion of a redesign or let's wait and see, that's not where we're at. We're expecting to submit our final design this month.
I appreciate that. We're also expecting to get through all the rest of what we need to address as well. And whether that affects your final design or not, I don't know.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
I guess the question I have for you, Pat, is there a sense of what kind of improvement that can really provide?
Well, it came up during the discussion of mitigation, and it's like,
Mhm.
that might be one possible mitigation thing is to improve Scituate Brook, so.
Right.
I can understand, done a lot of work on stormwater design, and, you know, if it were a major redo, I think it would be out of the question, but if it was something that you're bringing in water and you're bringing water somewhere else, then I mean, the commission hasn't, you know, dug in their heels or made any decisions on it, it's just come up as a question.
Yep, okay. Could I ask who's the stormwater expert for? Yes. So the stormwater design as exists today, how much of the current volume that's going to Scituate Brook is still going to Scituate Brook before and after? Is it 1-to-1? Is it 80% of what before development, or what's the number? Do we know?
I don't know the number off the top of my head, but it's probably about 80%, which is why we're trying to rebalance to get more of it to go to the south.
Mm-hmm.
And it's difficult, with your bylaw, it's difficult because we have to design it for a 100-year storm and not increase it, which makes it difficult to not decrease it substantially for a 1-year storm.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a balancing act. But we are doing the basins with overflows and trying to get it so that they will overflow at a 100-year storm, possibly at a 25-year storm, and then have adjustable overflows too. So we can try and balance this as well as possible, as close to existing as we can.
Okay. Questions from the board?
So just to clarify, I guess what Janet was saying, that there's no redesign of the basins, they're still the same size.
They're the same size.
Okay.
But the stormwater itself, the report will be redone.
Yes.
And refigured and renumbered, so
Yep.
it does need to be reviewed again.
Right, I was just
Yeah.
concerned, you had mentioned the size, so.
Yeah, I thought that was being adjusted a little bit, but it's their design.
Okay. But part of the rebalance is trying to get trying to keep the volume flowing to Scituate
what
Brook
we're
that's
trying to
flowing
do.
now.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else on stormwater? Anything in your slideshow on stormwater we should see? Okay. Any questions from the public on stormwater? We're going to get ready to move on to traffic here. So maybe is there somebody, are you representing?
Represent traffic too.
Okay. Well, maybe we can let you kind of give us a sense where you think things stand here.
So Vanessa and Associates is a sub-consultant to Horsley Witten for the traffic. And they provided a letter in response to the applicant's latest revised traffic study and traffic information. There was a response letter. October 4th, Vanessa and Associates provided a letter to the board, and there's maybe 5 outstanding items. And has the applicant had an opportunity to review this? And do you guys have any concerns with any of these items that we really need to discuss with the board? I think that's what would be the important thing. And the width of the road and the width of the boulevard, I think, is going to be a prominent conversation.
Sure. So do you want me to just kind of go, I can respond to discuss each of the.
Does that work for you?
Yeah, I think I had a list of like 6 items that were open on.
6 items that are open.
If you're prepared to respond to those, then sure.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Again, for the record, Erin Fredette with McMahon Associates. So just going through the list, the first item was regarding Vanessa noted or suggested installing an RRFB, which is a rectangular rapid flashing beacon at the crosswalk at Hatherley. So we're proposing a crosswalk at the intersection of Road A and Hatherley Road with conventional signage. And Vanessa notes that due to the speeds recorded on Hatherley, that an RRFB should be implemented. I think in this particular scenario, speed is one thing to consider, but other things to consider are sight distance and volume of traffic as well as volume of pedestrians. Given the type of development, we wouldn't expect pedestrian volumes to be very high, particularly during the peak hours. We would expect them to be, recreational walkers spread out throughout the day. Regarding vehicular traffic, during a typical weekday, the maximum peak traffic volume that we saw was about 300 cars. Every other hour during the day was less than that. So if you break that 300 cars over an hour, it's about 5 cars per minute. And those will bunch and vary depending on traffic flow. But really what it comes down to is that there's ample opportunity for people to cross Hatherley Road when there's very few to no cars at all. There's just the volume doesn't really require that somebody or a flashing beacon to interrupt that traffic flow, because there are plenty of gaps out there today.
Is there a standard?
RFBs are relatively new. The MUTCD, which is the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, doesn't have a specific, we call them warrants, which is usually like a set of guidelines. If you check off all the boxes, that means you put it in. This particular type of device doesn't have those check boxes. It's really engineering judgment. And then the last thing was regarding the sight distance. It's flat out there. It's very straight. There's, you can see for quite a long way. So if somebody is crossing the road, vehicles approaching should have ample opportunity to be able to see them. It's also a very narrow road, not more than 30 feet. And so even walking at a slower pace, we would only expect it to take somebody maybe 9 or 10 seconds to cross the entirety of the roadway. And given the amount of traffic, there should be plenty of opportunity for that to happen.
So you're saying that this isn't a necessary
I don't believe
device?
so. Conventional signage with the conventional striping should be adequate given those factors.
Okay, so now we have dueling engineers. Have you discussed this with VAI?
No, we have not.
I think that would be appropriate.
Yeah, I think that would be easy. And I think that, maybe, I don't know if this is something that the police department is concerned about, if they're seeing less speeding on that roadway, and that this is a senior development that.
Slow people.
Except that I could fit into that development, it makes me really hard time to say that this is for seniors, but needless to say, I could probably make it across the street. But it is something to keep in mind, and so that conversation can be had, but I also, if there is no specific warrant for one, it will become a decision that the town will have to make.
Gotcha.
So keep that in mind, that the engineers can go back and forth there, but at some point a town decision will be made on that.
Could I just interject quickly? Dave Bauer, I think with all of these items, the intention would be to circle up outside of the meeting and talk it through and just come to an agreement, so that when we come back, there's a decision, at least a recommendation, a unanimous recommendation back to you. We're just giving you the.
We would prefer that.
Yeah, absolutely.
To the extent that there are a couple of open items that are two different opinions, we'll make a decision. So.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, so there are other items that are concerned?
I think the only other one was regarding the roadway widths.
And the boulevard.
And the boulevard, yeah. So Vanessa notes the NFPA 1 code stating that a minimum of 20 feet in roadway width is required for all fire access roads. There is a Massachusetts amendment to that code, which is the Massachusetts Fire Safety Code, and that code does also identify a 20-foot minimum, which we're proposing throughout the site. But what Vanessa called out was specifically the lanes on either side of the median at Road A, where it intersects with Hatherley Road, and how that was less than 20 feet. There is an exception in the Massachusetts amendment that says for a boulevard-style roadway, which we would consider this, lanes can be less than 20 feet, but must be at least 10 feet wide. So that Massachusetts code gives a provision where in this setting where there is a lane, a median, a lane, that those lanes can be less than 20 feet.
So my understanding is there's another sentence that goes along with that amendment that basically says it can be less than 10 feet if it's not going to a building or a structure.
If it does not provide direct access to a structure. And so, I don't know if you have if we can pull up a site plan, but the road A, which is on the east side,
The top coming off of Howard?
yeah, you can see that the median does end and would provide that minimum 20 width where these structures start. And so the fire truck would be able to park anywhere along, adjacent to those buildings to service them if needed.
But the area in question is between the road and that first intersection?
The
Correct.
boulevard, that's the boulevard
Mhm.
section, that the width of each of those lanes is how wide?
I believe they're 12 feet in width, but I don't know.
11 feet.
11 feet?
Each of them is 11
That's
feet.
the drawing say.
Mhm.
And the reference suggests 20 feet. You can go down to 10 if there's no structure that it's, and so, I guess when I read it, I was thinking, there's a lot of structures it was going to.
Yeah.
So,
They're all, in
right, but
addition,
now you're showing it that way, I was like, oh, I didn't look at it that in that
yeah.
light.
And there also are 2 other access points to the facility, so if for whatever reason that entire drive aisle were blocked, they do have the emergency access off of Ermine as well as off of the regular access off of Tilden Road. So it's not like the community is totally isolated should that driveway become obstructed.
Yeah.
Okay, but again, this falls into the category of you'll talk with VAI?
Right.
Okay.
Can I make one other comment to that?
Yes.
I spoke with Deputy Fire Chief Elliott today,
Uh-huh.
and he wants to make sure that the inside turning radius for those turns is a minimum of 25 feet. He said the inside has to be that, so that the fire truck can get around to the
So
pole.
point out where inside is in this,
There, I'm sure we can show them up
It would be in here, I mean, so that they can get in there.
into the lane,
Into
so
the
off
lane.
of Hadley Road
Yeah.
into the
Taking a
boulevard,
turn,
okay.
25%.
The inside versus the outside of the turning radius.
I think
Is that?
20, what do you say, 25?
25 foot on the inside.
Yeah. I'm sure we will,
Sure, they can do that.
That sounds like
Yep.
something that can be accommodated.
yeah. As well as he noted some of the hammerheads should be extended. I think that's something we can manage, as well as
Okay.
modifying some of those corner radii.
Yeah, the part of the roadway layout, and the fire chief's comments, I assume that the applicant would address any of the fire chief's safety
Absolutely.
concerns.
Okay.
So as far as all the other traffic ones, you're able to accommodate them and you can have a
We
conversation
can
with
talk to Vanessa.
Vanessa and to kind of come up with the bullets that need to be
Okay.
decided on.
So let me turn to my colleagues on the board here and see if anybody has any other questions.
What's that?
Bill?
Not at this time.
Not in traffic.
Richard?
I just wanted to clarify on the hammerheads, like that, they have already been extended based on the fire chief? All right.
I think that was it. I think one thing we had open from the last meeting was a construction traffic plan, but we'll address that with the construction plan, I'm assuming, right? Okay, and you did finish the additional measurements, all of that was done.
Taking the additional data collection
Yeah.
of the 2, so we submitted all of that to Vanessa, they reviewed it and no further comment.
Okay.
Can
Good.
I ask one clarifying question?
Yes.
The hammerheads shown here, are these the unredesigned ones or the redesigned ones?
Those are the older ones.
Okay, that's what I just wanted to verify.
Oh.
So those
That's an
have
old
been-
site plan.
Those have been redesigned so that there's a much bigger area for the fire truck to
Mhm.
turn around.
Okay. Okay, any questions from the public on traffic at this point? Okay. Oh, yes, please identify yourself. Yeah.
I just had some concerns regarding having the traffic light that they were talking about wasn't needed to cross Hadley Road. I drive Hadley Road every day. There's high volume, high speed on that road. a lot of near-miss accidents. Turning out is difficult in the mornings. So I am a little concerned with pedestrian access and crossing once there's more traffic happening and during construction.
Okay, thank you. I think we'll hear a little bit more when you've had a chance to talk with VAI. Okay. Next on my list was really the environmental review. There were some follow-up action items from the discussion about the remediation on the site. And I think there were a couple of things that we've received now is that there is a draft remediation plan. So we've received that and we got that feedback. I don't know if you have any comments on that.
Only that we've just received it and we've not reviewed it.
Okay. They also provided a rationale for why they didn't think they needed to re-notify the DEP. You haven't had a chance to review that either?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I feel.
No, that's fine. I just want to make sure that
Yeah,
those
yeah.
are still open items.
Yeah,
Okay.
we, after the 6th, I closed. I get up at a 10 when my letter was written.
And then there was, and I understand that might be here as a cut and fill analysis. Did you provide that here? Maybe you could sort of explain it to us?
Sure.
What we're looking at here?
Yep, so the different shading indicates whether it's a cut condition or a fill condition, so.
Is red
Yeah,
fill?
based, yeah, no, red is.
Red is cut.
Red is cut, orange is cut, and it's varying degrees based on the chart on the right. And the blues are fill locations. Again, same thing, just in the opposite direction. You know, the darker blues are the bigger fills, and the lighter blues are shallower fills, so.
And what's the net on site? Is the sort of a net zero in terms of earth, or how much earth is it net positive you had to bring in, or?
We do believe we have to import fill. We haven't calculated those numbers as of yet. There's some unique situations with the earthwork on this site where, you know, we have some earthwork coming out of the basins and putting gravel in them. We do think it's a net import, but we don't have it assessed.
And it's a little hard to get a sense, but it looks like most of the housing on sort of I guess that's the south side of the main road, and then the main road and everything to the north side is all being raised. Is that right?
Yeah, so the bigger areas of fill are this cul-de-sac here,
Yeah.
and then obviously this section here. And what drove these elevations on the site was that the site in general has a high groundwater table. So the stormwater basins, as you can see, they're almost at existing grade. In other words, that light blue there is indicating a slight fill at that end of the basin. This area here is on grade or a slight cut because the groundwater table is probably about 2 feet below that. And so that kind of drives your whole system. You have to work backwards from those basins with the pipe work back into the site. And, you know, what Kevin talked about earlier, where we're balancing the site to get the water to where it's got to go, you have to raise portions of the site to get the water to go where you want it. You know, and you use pipe work to the best of your ability to do that as well. But really the high groundwater table on good portions of the site are what drives the earthwork here.
So how much higher will you be than the high groundwater mark? Is there a minimum you're trying to hit on all of these?
Well, the basins themselves, based on the Mass DEP regulations, you have to be 2 feet above seasonal high groundwater. So we start with those elevations, and then, you know, it's based on working backwards up the roads with the pipe networks to make sure those work. You know, in the middle part of the site, you know, you're going to have sections where we're not driven by the groundwater table as much. It's more driven by the pipe work to get it down to the basins. In other words, these fill areas, obviously, if those fill areas are in this range here of 7, 8, 9 feet, obviously those are now 7, 8, 9 feet above the groundwater table at least, right? Because they're above existing grade. But these are driven too by the fact you have a wetland right here that's at grade, so these houses are up higher. This works to our benefit too, so that we don't have basements that are into the groundwater table.
And am I right, when I look at this, that there's very little that isn't being regraded?
That's correct. Due to the size of the basins, and just the earthwork, most of the site is, getting reworked. Obviously wherever it's white, it's not being reworked, so along the perimeters and in the wetland areas, except for the replication, that's where everything's staying natural. We're also able to preserve buffer area all the way around the perimeter of the job. This area in here and then out along Hatherley. So
Okay.
the middle part of the site does get disturbed, but we keep a nice buffer around the perimeter.
15 feet, that's pretty high, huh?
Yeah, are the units in feet? I just don't, the scale, the units of
Yes.
measurement.
Yes.
They're not meters.
On the right, on the right.
That wasn't labeled.
Okay, and at this point, we don't know how much fill you're bringing in, but you're gonna tell us that at some point?
Yeah, we'll put a calculation to that.
Okay. I'm assuming that'll be part of the construction plan, how you manage the delivery of all that.
Why is there such a cut on the, where it's showing red on the south?
This building right here?
Yeah, is it just because there's a hill right there currently?
Yeah, the buildings themselves, because they're excavated in the ground, that one just happens to be, what's happening here is we're coming up from Tilden and the grade comes up, we're bringing the road up as steep as we can, but it still gets you into a cut condition here. And that just is dark red because that just means that the basement is, the full basement is a full cut of, 6, 8, 10 feet below grade.
Okay. And once we get a chance to look at the draft remediation plan, that will address how you manage dust and all of that while you're doing all this?
Yes.
Okay. We've got it somewhere else here, but is there a way you can tell us sequentially how this construction will happen?
Sit back the other way. That was it back there. So this indicates the two different phases of development that we're proposing. The blue here is what we're considering phase 1, and then green is phase 2. And, what phase 1, the reason we established this was obviously we want to, when we start phase 1, we want to get that road connection all the way through for emergency connections so that we're not relying on one entrance. So we're building this whole connection all the way through. And by doing that, that forces us also to build basically every one of the detention basins in this area. Because every portion of this road network goes to some portion of these basins.
So there's a remediation phase that's kind of part of phase 1. Is there a
Yeah.
remediation phase as part of phase 2? Is there anything that's being done?
No. So the remediation in terms of the environmental cleanup that's gonna
Yeah.
spelled out in the RAM plan, that's all in phase 1, because that's all in this area in here, right? Three of the 4 areas of interest are over here, and then there's one on this side. Over here, this is where the lead paint chips and stuff were found from the old buildings. We didn't shade the single-family units, but essentially those are phase one as well. Those would be worked on as they're sold, but we anticipate that they would be selling in phase one. So all of the remediation work would be in phase one. And that would be one of the first things that we do when we get to the site.
Yeah, I would imagine so. And so you're not going to build the sort of the road to the emergency connection up on the kind of the northwest end there? I forget what street it is. Yeah, to Ermine?
Yeah, that would be, the road network that's in green wouldn't be built until we went into phase two. Is this, we would be having this through connection, so we'd have two accesses to get into the site.
Okay. Questions on the environmental review?
I have a question.
Yes.
Are you going to further delineate as part of this phase one, I understand you want to do the remediation in the basins, which of the homes are going to be like the first ones of phase one built, or is that going to be part of the plan?
Let me comment on that.
Yep.
Dave Bauer with Toll Brothers. I think we've commented before that we are not spec builders for the most part. We build as we sell. So a key part of our marketing strategy is to offer a mix of home sites that address the different wants and needs of the customers. So some customers may really insist on being on a cul-de-sac. Some of them may want a certain sun orientation. Some of them may want a view. Others may not want to pay for a view. So there really is a different home building strategy, different than road building, where we'll want to offer homes in a variety of different locations. So within phase one, we'll have a logical sequence to it, because we won't want to move in people into a building and then have nothing else happen for a year after that. But we will basically be looking to market phase one right out of the gates. And but again, there'll be a marketing sequence to that where based on the buyer input, the buyer demand, and what they start to tell us about where they want to be, we need to be able to decide on the fly, okay, well, let's open up this cul-de-sac because that's where the demand is, and let's hold off on this other cul-de-sac because we don't want to have a checkerboard scenario of construction. So it really is a react to the market type of strategy.
But that'll be figured into some of your construction impacts as you develop your plan.
Impacts in terms of what?
Well, like you said, you don't want to be opening, you'd probably like do one cul-de-sac area first, because you don't
Yep.
want to have just, one or two homes down
Right.
in that area.
Right, so let's just, for hypothetical sake, let's say we made a decision that this was going to be the first marketing area to open, and we wanted to build these homes to make it nice and neat and consolidated. And then we open up for sale, and everybody wants to be over here for some reason that we didn't anticipate. We have to be able to react to that and make a logical decision as we go. Maybe we open up this area and we decide not to open this area. Maybe we have to do both, and we have to just find a way to manage that. So it really requires us to be agile and react to the market. If we are too stubborn about that, for the sake of logistics and the ease of the operation, we can end up really damaging the marketing success of the community and missing out on what the market's really telling us to do. And frankly, a lot of builders, and we've made the mistake too, where we kind of are stubborn about the convenience of how to build the site, and we say, well, this is the road we're going to build, and we're not even going to think about anything else. And you can end up really failing from a marketing standpoint if you don't listen to what the market tells you.
So how much of the, before you build a house, right, you're going to do the remediation, and
Certainly, yeah.
you're going to do the earthworks and the infrastructure, right? How much of all of that, are you doing all of the infrastructure? and then
Yes.
waiting. So everything in phase one will be built, the stormwater systems will be operating, all those kinds of things.
Well, let's clarify, certainly before we're ready to occupy homes, but what we would expect is we would start pre-selling from a sales location, like a sales trailer, and we'd pre-sell such that we felt that if someone bought a home, within the next few months, we'd be getting a permit and be able to start that home. So we might start pre-selling while Scott's team is working away on the roads and the infrastructure. We may be starting to sign purchase and sale agreements. And while Scott is working away on various parts of the infrastructure, we may be starting foundations and getting houses going. But certainly by the time, let's say, for example, and I'll just make this up, let's say this is where the first sales take place, certainly by the time we got anywhere near the latter stages of building those homes, we'd be paved, the infrastructure would be in, water and sewer, power, everything would be, to a standard where we can expect occupancy.
Right.
Of course.
Right.
So there's a lot of
So it's not stop and start on the earthworks, on the infrastructure.
definitely
It's
not.
only start and stop in locations on actual buildings.
Right.
Okay.
And again, that's one of those really important economic decisions that if we were to just go build all the infrastructure and put that much money in the ground before we get the home sale operation going, that's how you can over-leverage yourself or overextend yourself and have major issues with the project. So it's dovetailing the two together in a logical and smart way. It's very important to us. But we recognize that there are some practical considerations. We don't want to move someone into this home while we have, earthwork and site improvements and all these things happening right next to that house. So we have to make logical decisions about where we sell and build and occupy houses. And it's not really something that we can chart out perfectly at this stage.
All right, well, hopefully we'll get into construction phasing a little later, but just, let me see if Jana has anything on environmental impacts at all. Did you?
No, I have no comment on anything.
Okay.
We will review everything, and we'll go through the reasonableness of the cut and fill calculations, but they'll provide a number.
Okay. Questions? Yes?
I have a concern about Phase 2. And I know that it's somewhere down the road, probably 3 or 4 or 5 years out, whatever. It appears that the length of the roadway, which is obviously a dead end, it is almost as long as what you have going from Tilden to Hatherley. That's a lot of heavy equipment, a lot of construction with only one way in and out, or am I missing something?
That right there is our emergency connection such that this is not a dead end.
I understand, but
you're not
that's,
bringing
but you're
trucks
not
and
bringing
things.
trucks over that.
Absolutely not.
I understand.
Yeah.
So you've got a lot of staging and what have you to do.
So just to clarify, are you asking about building roads and site improvements or houses? Is the context the house part of it? Or
Both.
You
Okay.
have potentially occupied houses where you need to bring a lot of heavy equipment
Yes.
in
Right, so
to do grading,
Yeah, it's a great,
infrastructure.
that's a great question, and this is where Scott's team would be building these roads and basins and infrastructure and padding, meaning, getting the land to that ready for house building elevation before we start building houses in there.
I understand that.
And then, if I could just finish, in a situation like this, we would really try and force sales to start back here and then back our way out of a section like that, so that as we occupy homes back in here, we're not passing those homes for the next year to go build further behind those homes. So we would try and build out this cul-de-sac back in here such that we can back out of it. And now that's a section that's really quarantined off as a green, finished, occupied area, and we're not bringing concrete trucks, past it. For example, we try and avoid building and occupying these homes first, when you have these homes to build later, because then those people would move in and have a year's worth of home building to watch, with the traffic and everybody going right by their houses.
But don't all the other people have the same problem?
It's never perfect, but when we have the opportunity, and that's why I focused in on this, we really look to try and build it out and back out of there. But if someone buys right here, when they buy, they're gonna sign something that says they understand they're living in a construction site and they're gonna have trucks driving by their house. And that's just the reality of building a project like this. Did I answer your question?
I'm going to save it for later.
Be happy to get it out of the way now.
I just think that to me, it's almost backwards.
Let's hold the
That's it?
construction
Okay, fine.
sequencing a little.
Fine.
I'm
That's
sorry,
fine.
I got us into it, but I wanted to
All right,
finish
fine.
on the
No
environmental
problem.
review. And I really wanted to understand how they were doing the remediation here for the, it looks like it's all in phase one, right?
Yes. Our goal is to have that fully addressed before we really get into the bulk of infrastructure and home building.
Okay.
Have it out of the way up front.
Any other questions on the environmental review? Okay, any questions here? Yes?
Sean O'Connor, 132 Tilden Road. So a couple things. In previous meetings, so just going back to the dirt in and out graph, can you go back to that graph? So for some of the previous things, we saw the visuals of what the homes would look like, and just based on that, just for clarity, with all the blue and with the, seems like the earth you're bringing in, is that going to change the perspective at all from the street view of what those homes look like? We saw some things before, they're going to go really high, just so as everybody has
You've
seen
got a
those images, we're going
perspective
to
here.
see a new picture that looks very different
So
of what those units look like.
that's a great question, and the answer is that the graphics that we've presented. Yeah, go ahead. These digital images are actually utilizing the final grading of the project, the exact final grading of the project, the exact architecture and siting of the homes. So this is not just an artist rendering from whatever perspective he or she wants. This is an exact perspective from the grading of our plans. We basically have created the site in a digital space and then taken certain vantage points from, this is really meant to be exactly what you'll see if you're standing at this point.
And what point is that on the site plan?
This is coming in the main entrance, on the right side of that boulevard entrance.
Boulevard, this is
Yeah.
the boulevard entrance.
Looking
And
towards
this
the
is this the
clubhouse.
first road?
Right,
Correct,
to your,
right.
it's the first right turn, so your clubhouse and the pool is just beyond that building.
Sounds like a little hill in the front of their yard based on that tree, looks like about 5-6 feet from the sidewalk up to the,
At least,
looks
Yeah.
like a little,
maybe
a
10.
little difficult to read the grass cut.
Well, the hills are good in a lot of ways because they create some interest rather than a pancake flat site. So, as long as you can mow them.
Ask a question about that area.
Yeah.
That area is, you say that's next to roadway A? That's next to roadway A. That section of roadway A is 30% slope. It's like 7% slope. And the driveways appear very steep as well. Can you, is there any way that can be reduced?
Well, the driveway of that building goes out to the road here, and those driveways are probably between 3 and 5% gradient. So they're actually very flat. In terms of the main boulevard entrance coming in, we actually have this perspective. And this, again, is the exact architecture, the exact grading of the site. You're standing on Hadley Road looking up that entrance. So, while it certainly has an upgrading, it doesn't look terribly steep. And these are some of the drawings that we presented to the design review committee as well. I hope I addressed your question. Was it about the building, the driveway to the unit?
The roadway, part of Road A, for a large section is at 7%.
Mm-hmm.
I have a concern whether that's rather steep for a 55-plus development.
And I think you're talking about this section right here as you go up the hill right there?
As you go up to the top of the hill, yeah.
Yep. I can only give you my opinion and my experience that 7% on a main entrance that's pretty much straight is not a concern to us. And we're in the business of servicing the end user here, so, you know, that's a consideration for us, driveways and, you know, steep roads. We don't want to turn off our future customers by that.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, another question, if you could go back to the environmental, the first slide with the.
Go
So
ahead.
just, as you're going there, I wanted to ask about the, sorry, the
Which-
dirt in, dirt out.
Cut
The
fill.
cut
Dirt in,
fill.
dirt out, what are you gonna call it? Cut fill. Thank you. So just, from the two catch basins, that's a lovely picture we just saw of Hatherley. But on Tilden, there's like those two catch basins there, right? So what are those gonna look like? How big are they? How deep are they? That's good, because they look like they're right on Tilden
We don't
Road.
have the landscaping.
So what's that gonna, visual gonna be from the sort of back end of the development?
We have the. Really, the answer is in the landscaping plan, because you don't have a lot of natural buffer out there. We are, you know, doing a lot of development right out by the street. So the answer really is in the landscaping spec, that I don't know if we have that entrance here. But similar to, if you could go to the main entrance, Dave. Similar to this field where you see the plantings, you know, most of those trees and shrubs, those are newly planted by us. We'll have the same spec at the other entrance, you know, fencing, piers, trees, things like that.
So would there be, in other words, like behind those trees, say behind that fencing, would there be fencing on Tilden Road? Would there be catch basins behind it?
We have some piers and fencing that are really a decorative landscaping feature like that.
And the catch basins are deep enough to be dangerous, right?
Can I ask, are you, when you say catch basin, are you meaning the detention
Yeah,
basin?
there's two big,
The big,
yeah.
yeah,
Right.
only because the catch basin is like a small.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
You're talking
thank
about
you.
the detention basins.
Two
The
big
swimming
ones there on
pools.
Tilden Road. Thanks for clarifying.
How deep are those?
Let these guys answer. How deep are those basins typically?
Yeah, so the basins themselves, from the top of the berm to the inside bottom is only 4 feet.
And how much of the year will it have water in it?
They only hold water for less than
72 hours.
72 hours max is what Mass DEP says they can
Mhm.
hold water.
Okay. Any other questions?
Sorry, final question, maybe, is, because it's environmental, and so you're moving so much cut and fill, what's the tree situation? How much you taking out, how much you leaving, any way you can figure, I mean, it's, obviously there's a ton in there now, but what's the overall development gonna look like from existing trees? You're just gonna clear cut and put in all new trees and shrubs, et cetera, as you just said?
The fact of the matter is that in order to do what we're doing here, trees have to get cut, and all of the areas where we showed cut and fills, those trees have to come out. That's just the reality of a development like this. There's no soft way to put it. At the same time, we have a landscaping plan that's substantial, and this gives you an idea. Granted, this isn't year number one, but there's substantial planting, substantial trees, fencing, shrubs, you know, and the site's meant to look like this after a few years of growth. So, you know, we're really trying to make it look lush and pretty, but we can't save trees when you're developing a site such as this with some of the engineering challenges that we have.
So I think as you had represented it before, basically this is getting, the area that's being developed will get clear cut, essentially.
Yes.
And that there's a 50, 60-foot buffer around the perimeter of the property that remains? Is it that big or is it smaller?
60's
Yeah.
Go back to the site plan. Was it on the site plan?
This probably doesn't give you that
No, it doesn't
answer.
show it there.
But do we know how many feet it is offhand?
It's 60, I believe, is in is the setback requirement in the bylaw.
Right there, right?
We're talking about
That is that dash
I'm
line.
talking about that strip right there, right? Is that a no-build area? no cut area?
Can you grade it,
Undisturbed?
can you grade into
Yeah.
that?
It's a setback only, it's,
Setback's a vegetated area, so yeah, it will be disturbed, but it'll be vegetated.
So it will be clear cut, is what
Well,
you're saying?
just to be clear, we don't go out there and say, okay, step number one is cut down all the trees, right? We go out there, we have a limit of clearing that's established in our plans. We cut down, every tree we cut down costs money. We're looking to minimize the amount we have to clear, but I think, and we can verify this, but I do believe that clearing and grading can occur over that particular setback. And we'll replant wherever it's logical to replant in terms of having a natural buffer. And then, of course, all the wetlands, the wetland buffers, obviously, we're not cutting
Yeah,
in
you
those
can't
areas.
touch those. But everything else, you pretty much are taking all the trees out. There's too much cut and fill here not to do it.
There's no way to soft step that. That's just the
So, I
reality
mean-
of this site.
So it is being completely cut.
It is.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes?
Elise Klein, how much are these houses going for? You're talking about a 55 plus population. How much are these homes?
We're going to have homes ranging from 1,800 square feet to about 3,000 square feet, depending on whether or not people choose to go that large. And the pricing would range from about 500,000 up. And generally, that's the market out there right now for new construction for the 55 and over. And we have several communities right now where our average delivered pricing is in that $500,000 to $700,000 range.
Thank you. Anything else on the environmental review? Okay. So, you have anything else, Karen? Okay. Let's move on. One of the action items we had from the last meeting was to work with the Design Review Committee. And I see that there was a meeting on, was it the 18th of September?
Yes.
Yeah. And the Design Review Committee provided us some feedback, but I think, and part of that feedback was they didn't feel like they had enough information to adequately address a number of things. I'm assuming you've gotten that feedback from them.
Yes,
And
a
you're
lot of
working-
things with the intention is we're gonna set up another meeting as soon as possible, because they have material boards that weigh 75, 100 pounds, and they in specific materials and all that stuff, they have that. In addition to that, they've compiled, they wanted to know, Dave Buckley can speak to this, but they wanted to know what you're building, tell us in the proximity of the neighborhood, what other houses can we look at, we have all that data.
Mhm. And they were looking for a lot of information on siding style, roofing, shingles, trim, all that kind of, so that's what you're gonna provide?
Yeah, all that stuff has already been provided. Dave, correct me if I'm wrong. All that stuff's already been provided in a digital context, but they want to see the
Yeah.
hard
That is-
materials, which
right.
we're
That
gonna
is
bring the hot materials, but you can't mail these things. You gotta lug them. They're 100 pounds a piece.
Okay.
Yeah, there were some materials, Dave Buckley, there were some material samples that they had requested, as Bill was just speaking to, that we have prepared a sort of a little mock-up board, we would call it, that we could present, we would like to present to them, to answer their questions on that regard. And some of the other things where it wasn't practical to submit a physical sample, we have sent some photographs digitally to them.
Richard, were you at that meeting?
No.
No?
I
Will
was
you,
traveling.
when's this next meeting set up? Has it been?
I'm working on trying to get it set up.
Yeah.
I'm working on it.
Okay. It would be good if at least you could be there
Yeah.
for us.
Yeah. I'm
'cause
shooting for
we're-
October 24th, but I
Okay.
don't have all confirmation.
How's that
of
sound?
that.
That's good. That's a Tuesday, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fine. I'm in town. For a change.
Okay, well, any questions on that from the board at this point?
I think one of the things they also read, I have the, the notes here, was that they were concerned about elevations. Were you going to provide elevations to them?
They received these elevations here. Oh,
Yes.
Well, they
received-
were saying that that wasn't exactly what they were looking for, I thought. Let me see.
They were indeed saying that, Richard.
Yeah.
That's correct.
So they wanted actual.
They actually want physical elevations versus the graphic pictures. That's what they were asking for.
What's the
Ano-
physical elevation?
Like
They're
35
looking
feet?
for a physical built model.
Oh, a
Architectural
model.
drawings.
A model.
Three-dimensional physical built model.
Were they saying the model, or were they
No.
saying?
I think they were saying like
They were
a,
saying
Architectural
just
drawings,
an
right?
architectural elevation.
Those were submitted, architectural elevations were submitted of all the models that we're building, in addition to three-dimensional images, digital three-dimensional images were presented. They had mentioned, one of the members had mentioned a physical built model, which we generally do not do. We submitted the digital three-dimensional images, which is in a 3D world, all built and to represent the actual siding and the stone and et cetera that we'll be using on the project.
But they have,
The
so they have
architectural elevation
these,
was-
and they have
They were,
architectural
we
drawings.
reviewed them at the last
Yeah.
design review committee meeting.
Okay. So, what
I don't
else are
know.
we missing, Karen? Do you know? Will you check in with
I will
the
double check
DRC
all the
and?
information submitted.
Okay.
I wasn't aware that we had the application.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes?
Just had a request, if we could, because you say this is built on a correct model and correct elevations, et cetera, is there a way to get like a, maybe at a date, but something like a SketchUp model where we could kind of put through an interactive 3D model so we could see kind of this level of detail? You don't have that?
Yeah, that's the computing power to do that. This is built and how this is rendered is a little bit more involved.
We can certainly get many more perspectives.
Yeah.
If that, just
More
a
images.
dump of, 20, 30 different vantage points, if that helps.
I mean, I think if
That might be better at least, right?
Sure.
than- Without a real model of the whole place, I guess.
Yeah, I think maybe kind of an overview plan, and then you have, kind of this perspective is from here, 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 and you can see.
Sure.
Yeah,
Almost like a
1/30.
tour through
Yeah.
the neighborhood.
Yep. We have that. We can certainly get that to you.
It might, I'm sorry. It might be, if the design review committee is looking for something like that, it might be good to get them to say, here are the places
Yeah.
we'd like to see. And maybe they could take a site map and just do that.
I mean, there is a point where, it's substantial resource to create these things, and we've invested quite a bit to give you what we have. And we're quite aware that most applicants don't provide things like this, and we've just gone out and taken that initiative. So I think we'd like to give you the vantage points that we have based on what we've built to date, rather than, we wouldn't want to disappoint the board if they asked for a bunch of things that are just really difficult for us to produce. So I'd like to take a stab at giving you, what we think would get the job done, and hopefully that will work.
Why don't we start?
We're talking
with-
about quite an effort to produce this for you.
It may be
substantial.
that somebody's gonna ask you for some other,
Yeah.
if you're gonna invest the resources, it might be good to get on the same page
You know what
together
I'm-
to say, these perspectives are
Sure.
the ones that
What-
work.
What I'm saying is the work is
It's
done,
done.
and the architects can give the perspectives that are available based on what's been built. But if the board says, well, we'd like these other 10, well, that could be $50,000 and 6 months' worth of work, and we can't do that. So I'd like to just give you a dump of everything that we can provide.
All right, we'll start with that.
If I may, I think maybe what I'd be looking for, whether it's Hadley Road or whether it's Tilden Road, if I'm standing on Tilden Road, how high are those houses? I want to know the elevation of those houses in relationship to the streets that are parallel.
So we can give more images like this. The plan-
No,
the-
no, that, you're missing the point.
Yeah.
I want to know if I'm standing on Tilden Road and I'm looking into this development, the house that I see first, the dwelling that I see first, is 35 feet up.
You have the plans. That information is in your possession.
I think we're looking for something, kind of like a section elevation, I think, but you're saying you have it done in the graphic manner.
What
Well,
I'm-
Right.
in this image right there, you can actually see, may I just, that exact first house you see right there, you are standing on Hatherley Road in this entrance, and that is rooftops you see on these images, and we can provide a few more, but this is exactly what you were just asking, from Hatherley.
Okay, but I want to know, and where is, I mean, these are beautiful pictures. What is, because you're filling this, you are filling this, you're 2 feet above groundwater. For a lot of these places, you're bringing in 8 to 10 feet of fill. And then you're going to put a dwelling on top of that fill so that they have a basement. All I'm asking for is, and just direct me to where it is and I'll look it up. What is the height, the finished height of this building plus what you're putting it on?
Can I answer that?
Sure.
So our plans, the plans that have been provided, provide elevations, and the answer's building by building, what the height differentials are from wherever you'd like to look at it. We have all that data. If there's a specific location you'd like us to just clarify for you, we'd be happy to do that. But all of those elevations have been worked out. They're all in the plans. Meaning, you know, at the entrance, you're at elevation X, and the foundation of a certain building is at elevation Y, and so those answers are there.
I understand. I guess I'm not speaking clearly enough. The elevations are there for the land. That you have, it's 10 feet, it goes to 20, it goes to 30, and then you've got the house.
Yeah.
Is the house 35 feet tall?
Yes.
Plus your fill? That's the answer I was looking for.
So every home in the plan has a top of foundation wall elevation on it, every single home. So if
And
you
every
look at
single home will have, on top of that will be 35 feet,
approximately,
give or take.
Right.
No more than 35.
well, compliant
35
with,
is
compliant with the
max.
zoning.
Right.
So,
How easy was that?
I'm sorry I made it difficult for you.
Really? That's all I was looking for. Just tell me,
My
how
fault.
tall is this building?
Well, and to maybe answer Ann's, I actually didn't realize that the homes were in this. I thought it was all trees. So
It's
I
hidden
think
by
maybe it's a little
perspective
bit,
trees, you know, so.
yeah, well, it's a little bit confusing or not, because this isn't going to be day one, as you said, with the trees, right? So I don't know if it's something that could be done where you're, and that would help you, Ann, if you had this picture without the trees?
When I'm standing on Tilden Road and I'm looking up, I've got something that's 35 feet off the ground in
Right.
front of me. That's all I wanted to know. That wasn't so hard, was it?
No, easy.
And I don't think it was
Probably
unreasonable.
higher.
Huh? Probably higher. But add another 10
Tilden Road's going to
feet.
be the low spot, right?
Seriously, but I think that's what I was looking for, because this is going to dominate the neighborhoods. And, you know, not that we can get into it now, but I noticed in your cut and fill, the Form As that that you have across the street, those are gonna be filled as well, and they're gonna be up. So, they're gonna be really tall.
Well, not a single home here is going to be taller than your zoning allows.
Right.
But once we fill it, I know it's from the ground level, but the ground level has been raised.
Understand? If I didn't have to, I wouldn't. It costs a lot of money to raise it. So, as I said, it's an engineering necessity on this particular site.
But you answered my question, I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we've established that you have pre-existing architectural views like this in other locations, and you're going to
Sure.
provide us all
Can
those.
provide many, yep.
Okay. Anything else on Design Review Committee? Any questions from the public? Yes, ma'am?
Laura Curtin, 50 Kenneth Road. I had a question, coming off of the gentleman in the back, talking what the view would be from the road of Tilden Road. So my understanding is that if there's a 60-foot setback, that the trees in that 60-foot setback will not be cleared. Is that correct? Or am I hearing that that's?
I don't think I heard that. I think I heard.
That's not what I heard
yeah.
either, so I'm a little.
Maybe we can let
confused.
the applicant
And I'm
clarify
wondering
that.
if that's the same on the Hatherley side.
Yeah, what we're saying is that that setback is not a no disturbance setback. So there will be clearing and grading within that setback where it needs to be and where it's shown on the plans. If we can avoid it, we want to avoid it for everyone's benefit, your benefit and our future residents' benefit. But there is clearing and grading allowed within that.
I understand that
setback.
there's clearing and grading allowed. What do you anticipate leaving percentage-wise? 10%, 20%,
It's gotta vary all over,
30%?
right?
Yeah,
You have to have an estimate.
Well, it varies all over the site depending on where
Once
the
you
grading
clear
is.
and grade, are you
The main
replanting?
roads in particular.
Is there a way to
Once you get
quickly?
internal, then it's internal, but the boundaries around this
You're right up to it.
community,
I mean,
what's that gonna look like to the
yeah.
people that live in the outside of the community?
Just looking at the plans quickly, it looks like we're gonna clear and grade right up to Tilden and then replant it per the landscaping plan,
So the entire thing would be clear.
along Tilden. Yes.
And what about Hatherley?
Hatherley, there's quite a bit of area that you can see on the cut to fill where we don't have to, unless your stormwater is forcing that to happen.
There's quite a bit of wetlands along that stretch.
I think Hatherley would be able to leave a lot more.
Yeah, you're not gonna be able to touch a whole lot of
So
that.
that whole area that Dave's pointing to is wetland, that'll certainly stay. There's a lot of stormwater management on either side of our entry. But then, Dave, down to the south end there,
Anything else you stay?
I would think we're gonna save quite a bit down there.
Correct.
And the landscaping plans, if you care to take a look at them, show quite a bit of planting along Tilden and Hatherley, where we are clearing.
Landscaping is on our list eventually. We just haven't got to it yet. And part of, I guess, what I'd like to understand when we get there, and maybe it's on the plan, is how much really is going to be non-disturbed versus those that might be disturbed and replanted. So we'll address that when we get to the landscaping plan. Okay. Let's move on. We've had a lot of sort of back and forth of information and comments from various parties on infrastructure, and I'd like to sort of open the discussion on that. And maybe we could start with Janet, if you could just kind of give us your input on where that stands. I'm really thinking sort of water sewer, at least.
Yeah, basically, our letter made some recommendations. Some of it had to do with technical information that the applicant was able to respond to. And so there was a lot of things that they were able to adjust on their plan set. There's a number of items that really are under the water department and the sewer department's control. One of those is the water looping through the property. The water department has been pretty significantly stating that they want the water line to loop. At the moment, the applicant is not showing it looping. There's just two dead ends really that are not looping. So that's an outstanding item. And their water department has provided a letter and some information, or maybe it's an email, that some of the items that they're concerned about. Most of the technical stuff that we were able to point out has been addressed, but it's really the bigger items. And again, we're going to go through the letter and point by point be able to say, yes, this has been changed and this is okay or this isn't okay. But the bigger items that are still outstanding are the acceptance by the town staff and the various departments saying that, yes, this is good to go.
Okay. Yeah, and I note that we just got a memo from the Department of Public Works about sewer and water sort of capacity and engineering studies for both the water and the sewer system, which I think you guys just got today. So
Yeah, we got it today.
yeah, I just saw it today too, so I don't know that there's much that we can really sort of wade through at this point.
Just
But
two things to make comments on that.
Mhm.
One, I was talking with Brad earlier today. We're going to get a meeting with our engineers together with the DPW to go through these concerns. But one of the things at the outset is, point number 3 is that there'd be an independent third-party inspector. That's already figured into our plans anyhow, so that's a given. Items 1 and 2, we've already done a substantial amount of work. Substantial amount of work has already been submitted to the DPW, so we're gonna sit with them and figure out what in addition to that they need.
Mhm.
So we're gonna get that meeting as soon as possible.
And are you going to be there?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, part of what we've been talking about, just from a planning perspective, is how we continually assess, particularly these larger connections to both water and sewer, particularly given the limitations on water and sewer in town. We had a pretty rough 2016 on the water side. So we've had some ongoing conversations with the water department about kind of a next level assessment of, do we really have capacity, for water, not just for Toll Brothers, but for individual developments as they go. How are we going to continue to manage that and really do sort of an adequate analysis of that going forward?
Sure. Just so you know, though, the water and sewer commissions have already issued us the capacity for both water and sewer for this project.
Now, I read the email that came out from Sean Anderson
Yes.
about water supply. I think, unfortunately, the analysis was a fairly gross level analysis, and that is not the analysis that we're talking about. We're talking about really what is the capacity of the system in its stress condition to supply water, and not just for Toll Brothers, but for any development. And we want to try to establish that as the analytical method for it, because the method that they've put out there is a fairly gross level method and doesn't really address.
Are you talking about water, or are you talking about sewer?
Water.
Water.
Well, I would assume on sewer too, but I think on sewer, the issue was, what are the I&I improvements that are going to generate the capacity, right? If I'm reading this thing right, I'm
You have to correct me if I'm wrong, but the Water and Sewer Commission has already voted this a long time ago.
Our job is to identify that the infrastructure
So
is there.
So
And
you're telling me that the Water and Sewer Commissioners, that, in other words, that they're not the ones who make the decisions on whether water and sewer is granted?
we make the decisions on the site plan, and part of our responsibility is to determine that adequate infrastructure is available.
Okay, the selectmen determine that, but I'll talk to the selectmen and see if there's something I don't understand.
Can I add one thing?
Yes.
My understanding from reading of the letters was that, the selectmen said there was capacity in the treatment plant, but I think what the sewer department, what I read was they want to make sure that the pipes going through the road are amply sized, and I think it's more of a desktop study, is what I was envisioning when I was reading it, that it was like, okay, what are the sizes of these pipes, and is there a dead end someplace that's going to stop the flow, either water or sewer, to make sure that from the site to the plant, from the site to the well, the distribution point, there's ample size. That's how I read it.
Yeah, I don't think that's exactly what the comment was, and I know from the water side it wasn't, because I've met with the water department and had conversations with them about it. I think the idea is that, if you take a certain permitted capacity in town and say, last year we only used this much, therefore capacity is available, it doesn't do justice to the, variable nature of the water supply system, and where the water supply system itself is stressed. And we know it's stressed. We just went through a huge drought in 2016. And I'm not picking on Toll or anybody else. I think what we're trying to do is to say, what's the right analysis to determine whether we have the capacity to handle any new development. And as I understood this, and maybe I'm reading it wrong, that part of what they were trying to glean was, what I&I activities will generate the additional capacity that's being created by the additional demand, basically, that's being created by by this development.
Sure, absolutely, but we've already done a boatload of engineering 2 years ago that was submitted, reviewed, approved, and we'll do it again.
Right. I will try not to paraphrase this because I haven't really looked at it too hard, so. But I have been in conversations with the water department about, how do we as a board evaluate ongoing demands for additional water supply in the context of, some fairly severe years. And we should really be assessing not over overall capacity, but, summertime, stress periods, do we still have the capacity to handle it? Yes.
Jeff Cal at 28 10th Street. As a follow-up to your comment, Mr. Chairman, how does the general public in the town of Scituate understand how these analyses are made with regard to both sewer and water because of the constraints that we have on our existing systems? How are we brought in to understand not only how it may apply to one developer, but to other developers that may be in line, or even existing homes who are on septic or whatever, who have been denied opportunity to tie into our system? I'd like to understand how the public can be involved in that discussion. And then as a secondary question on the water and sewer, I think I did read somewhere that the roadways were going to be private in the development. Yes. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. What about the utilities? Who is responsible for the maintenance and of all the water and sewer facilities on the property?
Would you like to address that?
The association, the condominium association will own and maintain and have a budget for long-term repair and replacement of the infrastructure.
Okay, so the town will have no culpability for any of the utilities that are on that property?
No culpability, but they'll typically have an easement to be able to step in and inspect and make sure things are being done properly.
Okay, thank you.
We'll have to meter individual homes too, right? Yes.
Yes, sir. Since they started the sewer...
Could you identify yourself, please?
I'm sorry, sir. David O'Connor, 13 Grasshopper. Since they started the sewer system many years ago, they will progress, and then they have to stop because they have to increase capacity at the treatment plant. Then they'll progress some more and have to stop because they increase capacity at the treatment plant. If I recall the original timeline at the time that the town announced sewer work in the town of Scituate, the North Scituate Beach area will be getting sewers 20 years ago. Didn't happen. I'm getting convinced that we may not have sewers where I live in my lifetime, and if we do, they will come approximately 6 months after I've failed Title V and had to spend 30 grand in a septic system. So will this project increase the capacity so that they will have to stop again on extending the sewer system? Will it delay the sewer service to portions of the town that don't even... Are we providing new sewer service to a place that's brand new while failing to take care of existing homes that have been paying taxes for years that don't have sewer service?
I'll have to leave that overall discussion to the DPW and the Water and Sewer Commission. I think what we understand from sort of the current situation is that the sewer discharge from these homes is intended to be fully offset by investments in the elimination of infiltration and inflow to the existing system, essentially freeing up capacity that otherwise is being taken by leaks coming into the system, if you will. So that's my understanding of it, and I think sort of my understanding was that just reading this note that the DPW has asked is to say what specific I&I activities are going to create that capacity. But that's all I know on that one.
May I comment on that?
Yes,
please?
sir.
Dave Bauer with Toll Brothers. So just for those that might be new to this process, we have already conducted a public hearing with the selectmen to review the analysis that was done on capacity and all of these issues that are being questioned. We've conducted a public hearing that was noticed, and the public came and asked questions, and our analysis concluded that the capacity is there today for this community. The capacity is there today. However, the fees and the financial impact of this development is going to create funds to be able to implement I&I mitigation such that additional capacity will be created so that the schedule for other residences to be connected can actually be expedited beyond what it would have been. So I just want to clarify two major things. One is that a public hearing was conducted already, and water and sewer were both approved by the selectmen based on our engineering analysis, which also involved DPW. And again, the capacity is there today for this community to connect. Correct me if I misspoke.
I don't have, I guess I'm just trying to clarify, but I don't have anything on the selectmen's decision on water connections. What I have is a note from the DPW, from the Department of Water, essentially, with their assessment. And that's all I have. I don't think I have a Board of Selectmen
May I?
vote, but maybe I'm wrong.
I attended that hearing about the sewer capacity with the Board of Selectmen.
Which one?
The one for the 90 units.
Yes.
And that's when the selectmen gave you, in exchange for 1.2 million, which represented $14,000 per unit. And they gave, and that 1.2 was to basically enable the town to deal with its I&I. Am I correct in that?
Yes.
Okay. My question would be then, that was 90 units, that was 2 years ago. At the last selectmen's hearing, which I was at as well, it was changed to 142 units. No mention was ever made of money. So we need to really think about that if this is to go forward, because 14,000, which is the amount of money for each unit to tie into the sewer system, times 142 is a little bit more than 1.2 million.
No, it's not, Ann. As a matter of fact, if you look at all the documentation, it's still 1.26 million. The number of bedrooms in this project is less than the prior project.
That may very well be true. However, we're hooking up units, not bedrooms. So I think we're going to have a little bit of a
I think not.
kerfuffle.
No, the selectmen have already voted this and approved.
They voted for 90 units.
Read all the documentation.
Yeah, I think they did go back and address this specific on the sewer. I just haven't seen anything on the water.
Yeah, just on the water, the selectmen said there was adequate capacity. They had the town administrator authorize Tricia, the director of the water department, to give the letter.
Yeah, and that's the email that I'm speaking of.
No, there's an email. There's 2 written letters.
I have the latest, which is an email about the availability of water for this particular development. And it's an analysis of, essentially, as I said before, a gross level analysis of
we'll get you the
total
one.
capacity versus
Yeah, we'll get you the one from
total
2
capacity,
years ago.
total spent last year. Well, 2 years ago will be before this facility. Right.
No,
It will be before the 142 units. I'm talking about right now.
Excuse me, excuse me.
We'll get you the information. It's all been well documented and all submitted.
Okay.
Today I gave Brad these things, which is in possession of the DPW, the selectmen, and everyone else that no one had given to Brad. So we will make sure you guys have a copy too. If the other
Yeah, we have
the other
what
7
has been
copies
submitted
that
so
there's
far.
the
That's all we have. And as I said, we've had a fairly lengthy conversation with the water department about the water capacity side and how we should really be analyzing that to know that we have the capacity. I just saw the sewer connection. Well, it actually addresses both water and sewer, so you'll have an opportunity to look at it, and then we can talk to you about it after that.
Yeah, no, I just had this Julie's got it today. And as I said, we'll have a meeting and work all this out.
Yeah. Yes?
I am Carly Desmond, 38 Thomas Ave. I have another question about water conservation. I read the article in Scituate Mariner yesterday saying that water for this project was only going to be for household use and not for irrigation. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So all that landscaping, trees, grass, do the people who are buying these houses know that they are not going to be using town water?
Sure they will.
I'm sure they will. Part of our conversation has been that we've been waiting to hear kind of how you plan to address that, because you are planning to landscape, and there's a landscaping plan, so how are you planning to water everything?
I thought we had commented before, we're gonna drill wells on site to irrigate.
And how much water is it?
How much what?
Water is it?
I don't have a gallonage for you tonight.
Okay. Well, we would like to hear, it's still coming out of the groundwater aquifer, right? So we would like to hear what we're talking about here. I would also, I don't know if you've addressed this yet. We raised it at one point in time, but what kind of water conservation are you planning? Water
I
conservation?
don't really understand the question.
I think he means
Regarding
low-flow
the homes,
toilets,
or-
all
Yeah,
that stuff.
low-flow toilets, low-flow shower heads, et cetera.
Really, code compliance is where we are with fixtures in the home. I'm sorry?
And what does that translate to?
I didn't realize you were asking us to come in with gallonage flows out of shower heads, things like that, so I don't have any of that information.
Well, we'd asked about water conservation measures, and that's what I'm trying to understand, is what, if anything, it doesn't sound like you think about it in these kinds of developments then.
In these kinds of developments, we comply with the building code in terms of plumbing fixtures, and we do not further restrict the use of water.
So you can tell us what that is then?
We can tell you the fixtures that we use, sure.
Okay. And you'll also be able to tell us what kind of water use for irrigation?
We'll be able to quantify irrigation usage, yep. And we do take some measures to try and conserve. We try to, whereas in years past, we've irrigated planting beds on every unit, we've tried to get away from that and plant species that can survive without watering, and that's a substantial amount of water, but certainly lawns and common areas we expect to irrigate.
Okay. And that's all included in the landscaping plan?
The
Or is that-
irrigation coverage, I don't believe, is included, so we'll look at that and get back to you on it.
Just give me 1 second. Okay, yes.
I believe at a previous meeting, there was some question brought up as to whether or not there would be newer environmentally friendly irrigation systems used, such as using rainwater, using water from the catch basins, or stormwater runoff to maybe irrigate lawns and irrigate some of the plantings. I didn't know if that was considered. Again, I haven't heard it brought up at subsequent meetings.
We did evaluate the use of the basins, and the stormwater design as it is not conducive to using it for irrigation. So our plan is to stick to irrigation wells and work with the health department to permit those wells.
Okay. Anybody else? Questions on water?
You got somebody up the back.
I just want to see if anybody else on the board has questions.
No.
I'm all
All
set.
right. Yes.
I have a question, Jackie from 16 Carver Ave.
Could you just stand up? I can't hear you.
Hi, Jackie going 16 Carver Ave. I'm agreeing with Ann concerning the pricing difference for 140 houses versus the 90. 1.288 is for 90. If you go into 140, it's like almost twice that. It's like 1998. So it's not the same amount of money concerning what they had said, the 90 houses versus the 140. That's like 50-some difference. So that would not equate to the same. So there is a discrepancy there, which would need to be taken into consideration, because that's completely different than what they had agreed to before.
So the question really is the denominator bedrooms or is it units?
So the analysis we've done has always been about bedrooms and the flows from bedrooms and the discussions we've had in the public hearing, and then thereafter, when we came to the town and the town staff and talked about the idea of switching to this concept, we had conversations like, look, we're trying to tackle the stormwater bylaw. It's very expensive. It's very problematic. We're not sure if the project's going to work. We decided to self-impose age restriction, which the zoning does not require age restriction, and we could certainly make more sales if we were not age restricted, but we decided to self-impose that such that the net benefit to the town would make this project that much more of a benefit. And we've talked about that net tax surplus. Part of that equation was the per bedroom gallonage analysis, and the 1.2 million being the fee that we pay for this project, and potentially paying that fee in timeframes that help the town in its sequential I&I work. So there were a lot of discussions about, if we're going to go forward and take all these next steps and get to the point of coming before you, that fee would be based on bedrooms.
It was not done in a public hearing.
What's that? Yes.
Yes, David O'Connor again. Just a quick question. I had not realized this age restriction issue was self-imposed by the developer. If it's self-imposed, does this mean that they can lift the restriction at any time if they aren't selling well to the older people? And then we would have a whole different number of issues as far as the population, numbers of bodies adding to the school, that sort of thing.
It would be in perpetuity.
Yeah, I think the idea is there has to be a in perpetuity clause that it will always be 55 and older. Any other questions or comments on water at this point? Sounds like we have some follow-up work to do with the water and sewer department. And just let me know when you're going to do that. I might want to at least maybe have somebody from the board there as well. Okay. Does that cover everything on? Let's see. So Janet, just Horsley Witten's going to review the comments that came in on water. I'm just looking at some of your notes about the flow tests, the conduction of the flow tests, and whether those tests are valid.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So you've provided those comments, so we're just waiting for sort of resolution on those then.
Right.
Okay.
We will go through it point by point.
Okay. Thank you.
We have open items on zoning?
That's what I'm to next. Moving on to zoning review, and I'm going to let Janet give us her summary at this point on that. You should have a big notebook there.
We had a relatively lengthy letter regarding the zoning originally, and again, we will go back through the applicant's response point by point, but I tried to pull out some of the items that were more easily, or maybe more difficultly discussed with the planning board. The first concern really is the purpose of the residential cluster district, which I know was brought up at a number of hearings. And we're kind of deferring to the board. The applicant has stated in their response to us that they provide you with a narrative, so we, really.
Leaving it to us.
We're
We got
leaving
that.
it to you to decide if that narrative was appropriate and met your criteria.
Fair enough. I think I'm just looking at some of the notes here. There was a comment about a nature trail that is in the jurisdiction.
Yeah, so I wanted to kind of point out items that additional information or different boards will need to deal with. So one of the things that was discussed was sidewalks, the need for sidewalks, and a pedestrian path, and how the pedestrians would movement would happen. They are proposing sidewalks on one side of the street all the way through, and they are proposing a nature walk all the way through, which looks lovely. They will need to get that off, a buy-off on the Conservation Commission, because it will fall under the Conservation Commission's jurisdiction as it's within the buffer zone. So that's just so you're aware. You might think it's a great idea, but the Conservation Commission has jurisdiction on that nature trail. There's a number of references to the obligations of the homeowners association and what that, there'll be a document that basically says this is the homeowners association and what they are responsible for and what their obligations are. We definitely, Horsey Witten thinks it's beneficial to the town, obviously, to have a legal counsel review that and make sure that all of your concerns, such as the maintenance of the infrastructure, the maintenance of the stormwater system, maintenance of the roadways, and how that it's all covered. And the applicant has said that they are going to cover it, but it's just one of those outstanding items that needs to be reviewed and thoroughly reviewed. So that the utilities,
Could I stop you there, just
Yep.
ask the applicant when we would expect to see a draft HOA?
Generally, and I don't, forgive me if you've already communicated this, but I wasn't aware that, that we were expected to do that prior to completing this process. Oftentimes, we submit a draft and have a deadline for town council review and a final version maybe before some milestone like building permits or COs. But we could certainly get a draft over to you within the next few weeks for your review, without a doubt.
I think we would prefer that.
Sure.
Even if there are, there's information blanks that have to be left in it, having the template and the understanding of how you would address that, I think would be a good document to review.
Okay.
and as part of that, there's a utility conversation and the easements, and the town having easements through via the homeowner association. One of my comments was basically that the units that are on the residential units on the other side of Howley Road, they have a sewer line all the way in the back of them, and they will have individual, because my understanding is they are not part of the homeowner association, and that they are individual homes, so they will have individual easements for the sewer line that's behind their properties.
Gotcha.
And, there's an erosion control plan that will need to be completed. The size of the property is one that they'll definitely need to follow their EPA's NIPD's permit. They'll need a stormwater pollution prevention plan. It is a kind of something that every as soon as over 1 acre, they need to provide. It's standard practice, but it is something that should be provided and should be reviewed prior to, whatever the timing is. It definitely is something that has to be done before construction begins, but because it's such a large property, once the design is final, that is something that, can be completed standard practice.
Yep.
They'll be able to make that happen. there was a response about providing information from the fire and police department, and that, I would imagine that the board would want to see letters from the fire and police department accepting the road layout, accepting the hammerhead lots, the fire hydrant locations. I think that has been discussed with the fire and police department, but I think a letter from them for the board's records would be appropriate. And then the width of the roadways is something that seems to keep coming up as an item to be discussed. So I would recommend that you make a decision on whether the width of the roadways as proposed, there'll be private roadways. Is that acceptable if the town has any intention of plowing those roadways, then the DPW would maybe be involved. If they will never be plowing the roadways, and then it's really this fire department. Are they amply sized for the fire department? And I would see that as their call. From a stormwater point of view and green infrastructure, I'm kind of a fan of narrower roads, but it always comes down to the safety point of view. So I would see that from the fire department's concern.
Gotcha.
And there is, and again, there was recommendations, and we made recommendations according to the subdivision rules and regulations. The applicant's response basically is saying that they're private roads, so they don't need to follow the subdivision rules and regulations. Whether that seems appropriate from the width of the pavement, that's, I guess, I'm recommending that is a lot of roadways. It seems like it would be appropriate to have the road thickness adequate so that the residents that are living there do not have to worry that in 10 years they're going to have more cracks in their roads. But they're private roads, so it's kind of the applicant's choice.
I guess at least my request is that, we look at the subdivision rules and regulations and note where there are any differences so that the board can make a specific decision.
And that's what we tried to do in our original letter, and we can point it out again to be able to say, okay, they're they're following this one, they're not following this one. So that's what we will be able to do that for you. And there are, my comment number 9, basically is talking about the driveway units and the regulations are saying that they need to be maybe 65 feet away from an intersection for a driveway, and frequently that might be a driveway to going into Dunkin' Donuts. So you want your driveway not too close to an intersection. House lots frequently are closer, and it's kind of like you see them all over the place. So that's existing conditions. However, there are some of these properties that the driveways literally back into the intersection, and that is a little bit of a safety concern, definitely from the people living in those units. And private roads, they might not be concerned that some of the residents are backing into it.
Okay.
But there was a few lots that I actually noted that have a safety concern in my mind. And as far as the landscape review, our landscape architect will go through point by point. When I read through their response letter, they were willing to address the majority of the concerns, if not all of them, and to be able to reflect her suggestions. So I'm imagining that was a pretty clean, that she recommended using more native plants, and they said they would, and there was something about having more beachy, and
You'll give us feedback on that, all right?
And as far as, physical analysis review was also in that zoning letter, and we've just received the actual report that goes with that physical analysis review. Our initial response, our initial review letter, we did not have a significant concern with it. With their original letter and the original response, original physical analysis review. But the only thing that was outstanding was the value of the houses that would be residential homes. Reading through their response, to me, it was very reasonable. So we want to go through the actual report, make sure that the numbers jive, but I didn't see any big showstoppers as far as that report goes.
Great. Okay, thank you. I note that, that we're very close to our 9 o'clock hour, and I do want to try to bring this to a close, so we do have another special permit on the agenda tonight. Are there any, just see if there are any comments on anything that Janet's discussed on the zoning review at this point?
I'm not sure if it falls under zoning. I mean, it does to some degree because of the subdivision, but like I know all the utilities for the actual development are underground. That's part of the regulations. But the houses across the street, they're having overhead access. Is that correct or not? They're underground too?
Yeah,
okay,
we're going to do
good.
those underground.
Because at one point I thought they were overhead. So okay. That's
Okay.
it.
Any questions from the public at this point? Okay, we're at this point where I'm not sure we saw everything in your PowerPoint presentation, so you have, well, we did start late, so you have about 5 minutes to go through anything we might have missed.
I think you have your walking trails.
Yeah, really, the intention was to just come prepared for any visuals that we needed, so
Okay, good.
There's nothing specific.
We've covered everything you, okay. Very good. Well, let's figure out the next,
May I say something?
I'm sorry?
May I say something?
Sure.
I just wanted to say that I understand how costly all of this is for you. But please understand from our standpoint that we represent the town of Scituate, and we want to do what is in the best interest of the town. And so sometimes it seems like we ask questions that probably will cost you a little bit more money, but in the end, it is for both parties worth it. So I know that you've spent a lot of money, but we all take a gamble that things are going to work out the way that we want them to. This is not an adversarial comment, but rather, please understand where I'm coming from. I want to do what I feel is in the best interest of the town of Scituate, and this is going to have an incredible impact on the town. And I want it to be the highest and the best that Toll Brothers has ever done. That's what I want.
Well, we hope you'll look back and be able to say that we did everything you could have expected an applicant to do for a project like this.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Karen, do we have a motion and actually, what's the next meeting?
November 9th.
November 9th?
7 o'clock.
7 o'clock, okay. We have a motion.
I move to accept the applicant's request to continue the public hearing for the residential cluster special permit for Seaside at Scituate by Toll Massachusetts Land 3 Limited Partnership, Toll Brothers Incorporated, off of Hatherley and Tilden Roads until November 9th, 2017 at 7 p.m. and continue the time for action to file decision with the town clerk until December 22nd, 2017.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay.
So are we going to set an agenda for what we want to talk about?
Well, I was just gonna mention that. The objective next time is to try to tick off as many of these open items as we can. We'll start with the open items, we'll do the same thing. And then we still have a number of sort of areas we haven't discussed, construction phasing and the construction plan. We'll want to hear back, well, that'll be an open item, but we'll want to hear back from the design review committee, landscaping, et cetera. So, yes.
If you'd be able to elaborate a little bit on what you're looking for with regards to construction phasing, our perspective was what we've shown you already, which is pretty high level. And we just don't want to be guessing at what more information you'd like to see. You know, we got into home building, and if you could try and frame that a little bit for us, it would help us come more prepared.
I'm thinking construction sequencing and sort of the kinds of impacts that we'll end up having in the town, right, for that construction sequencing. I mean, that's why I was talking about phase one. The early stuff sounds like it's gonna be initially remediation, and then a lot of grubbing and clearing, and a lot of earth moving, and potentially, who knows how many thousand trucks to bring fill in. I don't know how much you're bringing in. We wanna understand the game plan and what the impact of doing that work will be on the town and on particularly the abutters, the abutting residences, right? And how you plan to manage that. And one of the things we've run into in the past that is part of this is how do you manage construction without flooding out the neighbors? Because what we're looking for is a stormwater system that functions from the day you start to the day you sold the last house, right? We don't want any excess water going to any of the neighborhoods. We've had that in the past, and that's one of the things that I think people haven't spent enough time on, sort of thinking about, well, if we move over here, how are we gonna manage the runoff, et cetera? So we want to know that you have a plan, and to the extent that you need to change that plan, how you're gonna do that. We would want to do that sort of within the town, within the planning board, know that you've changed your approach. So that's really what I'm talking about in terms of construction management. You also talked about things like all that concrete you're going to crush on site, right? Where's that going to get done? How do you manage the dust? How do you manage the noise, right? So there's, I guess, I don't know your whole construction sequencing, but that's what I'm really looking for. And I'll let others fill in if they have other elements.
Exactly right.
Yep.
Reasonable.
Totally.
And, you know, we'll obviously want to know kind of things like, you know, what you expect the work hours to be, and if there are periods where there's 24/7 work that you are trying to accomplish. I would expect not, but I would hope not, but we just want to understand what the impacts are ultimately going to be. You're going to be here for a long time, so we want to make sure we understand what that process is going to look like. So that's what we're talking about.
Okay, so there's not a specific template for that, you'd just like us to try and lay those things out for you?
Well, I assume you have a construction plan.
Oh,
so.
we have erosion and sediment control plans with sediment basins and sequencing from erosion control in terms of where we might stage material that would be on that plan. But then there are things you rattled off that we don't have our own particular template for, meaning where would we crush the concrete? Well, typically that's a field decision that we don't have on some particular sheet. So that's why I just wanted to make sure I understood if there was a certain template that you're looking for. If there's not, we'll do our best to lay it out.
We'll take what you have, and then if we think there's something missing, we'll try to flag it.
Okay.
But I would like to know how you plan to deal with the crushing, because it sounds like that could be a fairly lengthy operation, a dusty operation. I know it's very noisy. So.
Okay, we'll take a shot. Excuse me, we'll take a shot at it.
Okay.
You think?
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Can we take a 5-minute break? Go off the record here? Okay, we're going back on the record here. It's a little after 9, but this is a public hearing for small cell attachments to 3 telephone pole locations. Pole SC01, utility pole 236-1 at 26 Kenilworth Ave, private way. Pole SC02, utility pole 245-4 at 32 Harvard Street, a private way. And pole SC04, utility pole EECO-BRA, 14 Allen Place, a public way. So that's what's on the agenda. Who do we have here representing the applicant?
Good evening. My name is Daniel Klasnick. I'm an attorney. I represent Verizon Wireless. As the chairman has already read into the record, Verizon Wireless is proposing to install 3 different small cell locations here in the town. What we did is we filed 3 separate applications for each particular location. providing, I think, a fairly detailed analysis of your bylaw. Scituate, unlike a lot of towns, actually has a specific provision in its bylaws as it pertains to these types of facilities, so you sort of exercised that foresight and documented it, so that was very helpful to the applicant as well as working with the planning department to bring these forward. In regards to what Verizon Wireless is proposing, I think it reflects that we have a proven need for facilities to address coverage and capacity requirements in certain targeted areas of the town of Scituate. Basically, I think, as you're all familiar with, we all, or most of us anyways, we carry around a computer in our pocket. When I first started working in this industry, basically all the phones had to do was connect a call. Perhaps you had the ability to check your email, but it's become so much more extensive, and everyone's become so much more reliant on these devices, to the extent where a lot of homes are discontinuing their landline services entirely, and in addition to that, utilizing a lot of data. So the capacity demands on Verizon Wireless and the other carriers' networks has really been taxed to the point where they really need to get creative on their approach as to how they're going to address the needs of their customers. So I think what we've tried to do in this particular instance is to utilize the existing utility infrastructure in a manner that will allow us to deploy these facilities in such a way that it really would have a very minimal impact, because everyone's already accustomed to seeing the actual telephone pole there. If you have a transformer or lights, cable boxes and other attachments. So I think it's a really good use. In regards to the specifics as detailed in our plans for each of these locations, and I'm just talking about them collectively, and if we want to break them out, they're all basically the same. What's involved as far as the facility is...
I should just point out that we've opened the special permit public hearing for all three of them simultaneously, and we'll have to close them individually, if you will, so.
Okay.
Right.
But the equipment itself, I guess first I would emphasize there's no requirement for any ground equipment. Everything is located on the utility pole. In this particular instance, there is, we included in our description, just to give this board context, that it is necessary to replace the utility poles with taller ones. This was something that Verizon Wireless's RF engineer took a look at, and because of shadowing or other obstructions, in order to meet the necessary service needs or the targeted service area, it was necessary to do these replacements. But just for clarification, that isn't work that Verizon Wireless actually undertakes. That's the utility provider itself. Verizon Wireless simply enters into a license agreement. They've entered into master agreements with both Eversource and National Grid for the deployment of these facilities. I'm sure, as this board is aware, as a wireless service provider, Verizon Wireless is entitled to non-discriminatory access to any utility pole easement. So in exercising those rights under both the federal and state pole attachment acts, Verizon Wireless has entered into these agreements. But in regards to the facilities themselves, really all that's required is a single, what we call a canister style antenna. The ones that are proposed have a 12-inch diameter and they're approximately 38 inches tall. These would be located and mounted to the very top of the utility pole. In addition, other equipment includes what are called remote radio heads. They're large, not large, but they're boxes that are mounted to the side. 2 are proposed for each location. These are necessary for signal, for broadcasting the signal through the particular location. In addition to that, the utility companies require us to establish a separate service meter, so there will be an electric meter installed on each one of these as well. And then there's also diplexers, as they're called, cabling to connect the antenna down. The existing electric and fiber is utilized for Verizon Wireless's backhaul requirements and power needs. So as I had said, there's absolutely no ground equipment involved. There's no ground disturbance by Verizon Wireless. Really, that's all that's involved is they bring in a bucket truck. It takes perhaps a few hours to install the antenna and this other equipment, and it's done and they're gone. In regards to the need to the facility, Verizon, we did include, I think, a detailed RF affidavit describing the existing facilities. What Verizon Wireless currently has is macro facilities. Two of the locations, the Humrock region, I guess it's called, Verizon Wireless is really trying to achieve coverage and capacity from sites that are currently located in Marshfield. But as I had said, as the demand continues to increase on those locations, not only are there capacity issues, but there's also coverage issues. And the other location on Allen Place is a location where Verizon Wireless has a substantial need. So what we tried to describe in the RF affidavits and the maps that were provided was that the macro facilities, as they're called, those are the traditional towers or building-mounted facilities, aren't able to provide the necessary service. So as a complement, but not a replacement to those, Verizon Wireless statewide, really, not only statewide, countrywide, is in the process of deploying these small cell antennas. So they really do serve a critical requirement in order for Verizon Wireless to continue to provide service, capacity, and coverage to their customer. So as I had said, we did include an affidavit detailing that requirement. As I had already said, Verizon Wireless enters into a licensing agreement with two of these, as I understand it, are owned by Eversource, and another one is owned by National Grid. So we enter into a licensing agreement with them pursuant to our master license agreement for each one of these locations. As I had said, as far as the pole replacements, that's not something Verizon Wireless undertakes, that's something utility undertakes. It's called their make-ready work, and Verizon Wireless has to wait until they've completed all that before they would be able to install their equipment. So those are the essential components of these three facilities. And if you have any questions, we're certainly available to try and address them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll see if, first of all, either Karen or Brad have anything to add to that.
I did go out, via pictures of each one. So this is the picture of the location of 32 Harvard. Again, it is in a private
Way. Yeah.
That was the letter we received from the homeowner, correct, as
Right,
well?
that was the letter from the homeowner, right. This is the homeowner's house at 32.
And is the pole that we're looking at one that's
This is
going to
Harvard
be
Street
replaced?
right there. The pole, the shorter pole right here is the pole number that is due to be replaced. This other pole right there, I was told by a gentleman out there today, has previously been replaced this summer. And this one looks like a taller pole. But it,
So why wouldn't they put it on that pole?
I'm sorry?
Why do you need to put a new second pole in? Can't you put it on the first
No,
tall pole?
Yes, no, my understanding is that that replacement, the second one, would be utilized by Verizon Wireless. So this work has evidently already been undertaken by the utility to replace
So
those.
it's going on that second taller pole then? Is that
Yes.
the one it's going on?
And then the shorter pole would be removed?
Yes.
Okay.
right, because that's not the pole number out there, that, the pole numbers don't match.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how they assign them, but the idea is to install the new one and then replace the shorter one. So, I mean, each company has its own
You
designation.
just lost me there. I thought we were removing the shorter one.
Yes, I'm sorry, if I didn't say that, that's what I intended.
You said replace, okay.
Right, so this one's 32 Harvard.
Okay.
This one is 26 Kenilworth.
Ooh,
Which one is it?
the one on the right.
The one in the front, the taller one?
Yeah.
The poll number on this one was blocked.
Oh.
I couldn't see the poll number on this one at all.
Is this the one?
Yes, yeah, they would
The
have.
taller one?
Yes, exactly, to get up over the dunes and everything.
Okay.
And this is the one at 14 Allen Place. So this one is in the public right-of-way of Allen Place in the sidewalk.
Okay. Okay. Questions from the board?
No.
Nope.
Bill?
I just have a question. Between the shorter pole and the higher pole, what's the difference in height?
Well, at 26 Kenilworth, we measured it at 27. And then the new pole height would be 38 feet 6 inches, according to our application to the utility. And then the one at 32 Harvard, it was a 33-foot pole and would once again be at 38 feet 6 inches. And then the one at Allen Place, we estimated at 29 feet, and that would be replaced by something 34 feet. I mean, they have to go in the ground, so they're replacing it with a 45-foot pole, but I guess it goes that far into the ground to
they're
get to
all
the 38 feet
yeah.
6 inches. So I think part of the issue here was that these are old, undersized for the traditional utility poles, in my experience. So that's why it was necessary to get that additional height for RF requirements.
So ranging from 5 to 10 feet higher, basically. That's what I see.
Yes, yeah, a little over 10 feet.
Is that it? Ben?
No, I know.
Okay. Patty?
Can you guarantee that the other poles will be taken out in a timely manner?
Well, as this board is aware, that's governed by state statute, and it's really the utility. Verizon Wireless, as a licensee, doesn't control that. But I know under what we're being told and what we've been told in the past is they need to wait to have everything moved over from the old one. They have to wait for, if it's a cable company or someone else, to do that. But by statute, they're required to remove them.
Sometimes it can take a long time. It has nothing to do with this gentleman. Nothing.
So, I need some help from you here because I don't really understand the radio frequency analysis and the coverage maps, so-called coverage maps. So can you explain how the information that you've given us here demonstrates a need for additional coverage that doesn't otherwise exist?
Well, I guess initially I would note, it's a sworn affidavit by the radio frequency engineer. Most of the certification is textual, and what we've tried to illustrate through the RF affidavit, we list on page 2 Verizon Wireless's existing on-air macro sites. Those are the sites that currently are part of the analysis when they were developing these small cells. On the first page, we list the 3 proposed locations. There's a description in here certifying the need for these facilities, but in regards to the maps themselves, what these depict, you see the Scituate East and the Scituate South site, and then you see the Scituate Small Cell 04. That's the 14 Allen Place location.
What am I looking at? This map?
If you're looking at the map,
Yeah.
Scituate East and Scituate South, those are 2 existing facilities. And what we're depicting here are the sectors that currently are attempting to provide service to this particular area. But because of the distance and the capacity and the density of the use in that particular area, they're being overtaxed and they can't properly provide service to that area. What I'm told by the RF engineers, as far as showing the traditional coverage maps, their predictive tools won't allow them to accurately depict the amount of additional coverage. But what this is showing is that there are 2 sites right now trying to, with these particular sectors, provide service to that area, but they're unable to. In regards to, if you go down to the bottom where it says Scituate Small Cell 02 and 01, those are the locations at Kenworth and Harvard Street. Those particular locations, there's a real coverage as well as capacity need because the service that we're trying to provide are actually from sites in Marshfield. So those sites, because of demand on the network, distance, topography, aren't able to propagate the signal over sufficiently to provide the necessary coverage and capacity. So these maps, along with the textual information, are attempting to describe to you the fact that the current existing macro sites aren't adequate. So what we're trying to do, and these are very targeted, low to the ground for, for RF and wireless systems, to provide targeted capacity and coverage requirements.
And it seems very random to me. And so I guess I'm asking the question, you've identified 3 specific locations in the town of Scituate that need some additional support or coverage here. Is this the beginning of a very long list of these things? I can't look at red and green and sort of understand how that means you do or don't have coverage, I guess. It doesn't mean anything to me. And I'm trying to understand why you picked one way up here and, kind of Scituate Harbor and then 2 down in Hummerock. Are there 26 more coming?
Well, as far as future sites, the best way I can answer that is Verizon Wireless is constantly evaluating its network and is always trying to provide the best possible service. I would suspect there will be additional small cell locations. What they're probably trying to do is initially target areas where they find the most critical need. So from a network perspective, they try and design around that, and then once these 3 sites are in place, they'll be able to further evaluate the need for additional locations. So I'm certainly not representing that these are the only small cells that we will necessarily, Verizon Wireless will necessarily need in the town. These are the 3 that they've identified currently, and they've asked me to permit.
Okay. I'm still trying to understand where, the need for additional coverage is sort of demonstrated in these particular locations as opposed to any other location in the town of Scituate. Particularly, that's what's not clear to me, and maybe it says it in this radio frequency affidavit, but it's a Greek speaking Greek to me.
I apologize. Yeah, these would be areas of particularly probably heavy usage. They're both down here by a beach area, and the other one I think is up by the marina type of area. So those were probably areas of particular capacity. And,
Sorry,
and
can
as
you identify yourself?
Keenan Brennan, I'm a representative of Verizon Wireless.
Okay, so do you have an answer to that?
Well, I think a lot of these are driven by seasonal activity, or it might be a college campus or a particular venue that needs additional coverage to maybe handle seasonal or a specific activity that's going on. And I think that's what's driving a lot of these small cells for either 911 activity or for people just using it during the summer season, maybe in Scituate.
You putting them in elsewhere? Are you putting them in elsewhere?
Absolutely, yeah. There's a number of these going in multiple towns on the South Shore, Rhode Island, all over, essentially New England. And I think the common factor seems to be areas where there's maybe a seasonal activity, like a beach area, maybe a college campus, or something of that type of venue.
So then the answer to Steve's question is undoubtedly there will be more.
Again, like Mr. Klasnick said, it's driven by Verizon's incremental activity on the network, and they would assess it as they will.
Yeah, I'm sort of, I'm sorry to be a stickler on this, but, our zoning bylaws sort of require that the applicant provide information concerning the need for the antennas, right? And, which may include coverage maps or other kinds of similar information. So I'm thinking what you're telling me is the affidavit of the radio frequency engineer is what's responding to that requirement?
Yes, that's correct. This is...
And what I'm telling you is I'm having a real hard time understanding what the heck the radio engineer, radio frequency engineer is saying.
Well, I can...
hoping somebody...
I can go through each...
YouTube can...
Each item, if it's, I try to explain it in regards to this particular facility. He says at item 3, the proposed facilities are within areas where Verizon Wireless has identified a need to install additional facilities in order to provide reliable wireless service. The search area for each proposed facility was determined by the fact that wireless service needs significant improvement in these areas of Scituate. Furthermore, it was determined that these areas served by each facility would interact well with those of existing and proposed facilities in the surrounding area.
So is there a sort of current performance and an expected performance that sort of drives all this?
Yes, certainly from their, from their computer modeling. As I had indicated, unlike a traditional macro facility, because these facilities are so low to the ground and there's so much what the RF engineers call clutter, I've been told that their predictive modeling can't accurately show you, in a blotch of color, how much more service or how much more coverage you're going to get. So what we've tried to do in our coverage map is to show you the existing macro sites that we're trying to offload service from. So traditionally, probably Scituate East, Scituate 2, Scituate South, we're providing some measure of service up near the area of Scituate's small cell 04. But because of network demands, and as I tried to explain at the beginning, the exponential demands really that no one could have anticipated through the use of smartphones, streaming services, data requirements. Each one of these macro sites can only handle a finite number of traffic, and as more and more demands become, are made upon them, the actual coverage area will actually shrink. So where it may have provided service previously or some level of service, that service will continue to shrink. You will encounter more drop calls, missed calls, and an inability to attach to the network. In addition,
Do we know what, for the town of Scituate, do we know what that looks like right now? Is it only 3 spots that it's a problem and everything else is fine?
well, as I said, Verizon Wireless is always reevaluating its network. I would anticipate, as they continue to look at how these 3 sites perform, they're going to build upon that, and I would not be surprised if there were additional small cells that would be proposed. Given the nature of the area, the fact that, it's very difficult to put a macro site into a residential area near the beach, because it certainly wouldn't be preferable to try and put a tower. There are only small homes, there are no buildings. So this is a way to utilize the existing infrastructure, the utility infrastructure, in a way that allows us to provide service that I think everyone wants.
Steve, can I ask a question? So Dan, there's no predictive technology to see how well these work. Like, did I hear you say that after they're installed, you can update your coverage map to see how well they're performing? Because otherwise, how would you ever update your coverage map to see how well it's performing?
I would imagine you have a snapshot in time right now that says, this is how everything's performing. And that's how you identified these 3 little spots, right?
It sounds like the coverage map only really picks up the macro level stations, not how these are going to interface or interact with the overall coverage, correct?
Yes, this map actually shows what there currently is. It's not attempting to show what there will be, because as I had indicated in what the RF engineers have told me, their predictive models weren't really designed, the software they have wasn't really designed for these small cells. They're just too low to the ground, there's too many obstructions, so that they don't feel that they can accurately show you with the colors how it's going to actually propagate a signal. So what these maps are showing you is the existing service, and as it's stated in the affidavit, even though that it shows some level of service, that doesn't mean that that's actually adequate service being provided. There might just be a very weak signal, not in building, not in car, or if there's a lot of demand placed upon the network, as I had said, the coverage area will actually shrink, because the device, your handheld device, goes to whatever antenna is providing the strongest signal so it can connect. So for that instance,
I get all that. So what that's telling me is where the underperforming areas are right now, everywhere in Scituate, right? And maybe they're grades of underperforming, but the worst 3 are these 3, right? I was just trying to understand that, So if we have 3 really badly underperforming areas and 26 more that are going to need these things, is that what we're looking at from a town perspective? Are we going to see these things propagating all over town?
well, as I said, I'm, as outside counsel, only instructed as to the sites that they've identified to me to provide for permitting. But as I had said, I would not be surprised if there were additional sites. I can't tell you, and I don't think anyone can, because the network is constantly sort of an evolving creature, if you will. Depending upon the usage.
Yeah, but they have usage now. They know what the usage is now, right? And so they must be able to give us today's snapshot of, 80% of it's fine, 20%'s not. It just feels like, we're kind of in the same mode as we were talking about with water. We're approving things one at a time, and I'm just trying to get an understanding of whether we're gonna see 20 or 30 more of these things and where they might end up being.
As I said, I don't know that necessarily, Verizon Wireless has developed its network planning to that point. They really have, as everyone has, limited resources. So they have to focus their resources in such a way that allows them to emphasize those areas that they have identified to have the most critical need. So as I said, as these 3 sites are put on air, then they'll be able to continue to build and evaluate that. Having said that, as I said, I would not be surprised if there are additional small cells, just given the nature of the residential area, the difficulty in siting macro sites in those types of areas.
So,
If I may, I actually have a follow-up. My understanding of how LTE, data networks, things work is somewhat limited. So my question is related, is kind of in parallel to that, which is, do you lease or provide data for other wireless providers, or are we going to have kind of like AT&T or other companies coming in also requesting to put in this equipment on poles in the same area, and potentially, we have a whole load of these things in one small place? Do you have a comment about that?
Well, I can't really speak to the other wireless service providers' network design, but I can tell you that Verizon Wireless operates on its specified frequencies. These facilities are intended to be used for Verizon Wireless's licensed frequencies.
Okay.
So it would not be something that other wireless service providers would be utilizing.
But other wireless service providers would have the same rights that you do in terms of installing these kinds of things.
Under the pole attachment
Right.
acts,
Yeah.
certainly. Extends to all telecommunications companies.
are there any of these current small cells in Scituate right currently?
No.
No, right?
Not Verizon.
There are others?
I don't think so, not Verizon.
Are there some?
Where's the nearest Verizon small cell? Is it on the South Shore, or is it?
Oh, yeah, I know we've done work in Weymouth that I know we've installed there.
And I know you provided elevations here, which are nice, but do you have a picture of what these look like a currently installed one? Not
Yes,
just-
I do.
Oh, you do?
I did bring some photographs. This is a location. In the town of Lexington.
Okay. Well, that's helpful. Oh, you have the same one? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just the one. Town of Lexington.
Yes, it's not the tree. Mayor, I think, down the harbor with my phone, Verizon's pretty good, but I know that the harbor itself was Wi-Fi'd so that the boats could get service. And I know that cost $75,000, the town of Scituate, to enable Wi-Fi service in the harbor. I do know that there are a lot of drop calls in the harbor. And part of it has to do with the fact that the harbor is you're up on Allen Place, which is where you want to put this pole, but then you come down the hill. And it's really hard to get any type of coverage. And I think the same thing could be said of Hummerock as well, that people have trouble calling from Hummerock. Because, again, you are surrounded, if you look at the topography, you're surrounded by hills, Marshfield Hills. Yeah, so you've got Marshfield Hills, that's in back of Hemlock, and you have Allen Place, you have Harbor Heights, you have Otis, you have all of this hill that goes up to Hazel that basically blocks any type of transmission from the tower that's at Town Hall, the tower that's,
The Driftway would be the one that would service.
right. But again, it's,
Can I just add an anecdotal account? I live in Marshfield, so I'm familiar with the terrain here pretty well. So you've got, on a Saturday afternoon, there's, between the North and South River and the Bridgeway and, Scituate Marina, there's a lot of people. And I think a lot of this need for these extra sites, these small cell sites, are driven by the number of calls that are being made on a July afternoon. It's not so much whether or not the area is being covered in January. Verizon Wireless will measure missed calls, block calls, and drop calls in a particular area, and they will see the need to try to fill that need. Because that Driftway tower is not gonna be able to cover everything. If there's 1,000 boats out on the North River, then there's gonna be some additional need for capacity, and that's what's driving these small cells. It's not so much a coverage map as it is the need for more channels in the air. And that's what's driving this in. They measure all that, they know every time someone drops a call, they're aware of that, and that's what is moving these small cells.
Well, see, that's exactly what I thought. So,
Yeah.
so the question is, why don't we know that for, kind of the whole
I
area?
don't know if we could show you on a color-coded picture so well, but there is information which I think that would be up to Verizon if they wanted to share. I don't think but they know exactly, when you made a call and it dropped, they know that, and that's what they're trying to do now. And the same thing applies to E911. They want to make sure that they're covering the beach area, sufficiently for, Hummerock, Scituate Harbor, or wherever it is. Whether or not they're gonna be worried about Old Oak and Bucket Road is probably less of a concern, because it's well covered over there.
they also need to worry about Minot and the Glades.
And then again, maybe that's something they would tackle at a different time. We're here for these 3 sites tonight. So.
Right. Steve, frankly, I know we can get into the weeds on all of this, but there's definitely a need. Everybody you see has phone attached to their ears, and they're starting them younger and younger and younger. And we have somebody in the audience.
Maybe we should put cells
That's
in.
1 years I heard the other day. That's the average age of people starting with kids on cell phones.
Yeah, all I'm trying to do is understand what it is, and why it is they're asking for this, and whether we're looking in a longer term perspective at the proliferation of these on every pole we have or something. And, trying to understand how they've demonstrated the capacity need, right? Or the need for improved service. And I think what you're asking us to do is to take this engineer's word for it, right? Essentially, that there is a capacity and coverage deficiency, and that this has a probability of addressing those. That's what I'm reading through this. I didn't see anything that said, okay, the coverage strength in this particular area is one thing versus another. They say they've run models, but that's all they're saying is it's all behind the curtain, right? It's saying, just trust us that it exists.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think you take some comfort in that Verizon Wireless is in the business of providing wireless service. They're in the business of making money. They're not going to be proposing sites that they don't need. The whole purpose is to provide the best possible service to the town of Scituate, so that's what we're trying to accomplish. I think the affidavit, which is a sworn affidavit, certifies the need for the facility, describes in quite a bit of detail how it was determined that they need this facility and what they're trying to accomplish, and particularly at paragraph 13 goes into quite a bit of detail. I tried to explain why the maps can't really show exactly a color coordinated coverage or capacity offload. It's just these are targeted capacity coverage sites needed for high density, high demand areas.
I mean, if the board feels that they need more information, you should ask for the additional information. you should know that it's the town's stated preference that they do not want more cell towers. That they want smaller type of things because the cell towers are just rather
Ugly.
and big. And this is a way to help provide the service in a camouflaged type way that minimizes visual.
I'm just trying to determine if we're distributing the ugly and big all over the town.
I disagree. I don't have a problem with this picture. I really don't.
Oh, well.
I don't.
Well, that's
My opinion.
your opinion.
I mean, it looks almost as good as the tree.
But in our place, the new pole is gonna be 16 feet taller than the old pole.
The pole is gonna be 40 feet, the new pole is gonna be 40 feet, so it's gonna be a height of 34 feet. You're gonna have 6 feet buried in the ground, and then you're gonna have the antenna on that, so it
Right.
comes to a height of 38 feet, 2 inches. That's what's represented in the package that they've requested.
Do you have a gentleman's?
Well, let me see if I've gotten everybody else's comments here.
I just wanted to have, maybe, I read in the documents here, there was a report by a radiation safety specialist, and just to alleviate any abutters that couldn't make it or any public health concerns, I just wondered if you could, for the record, talk about the findings of that report.
Yes, we included with our application a report prepared by Dr. Donald Hayes, and and as this board is aware, the FCC has exclusive jurisdiction over the determination of compliance with, exposure levels. But what we did in our report was to certify compliance with those, both FCC and Mass Department of Public Health standards. What the report shows is that each one of these facilities are substantially below the exposure levels that are permitted under the FCC guidelines. There are specific tables for each particular location where utilizing the antenna type and power levels that will be operating at both the 6-foot and 16-foot height, we show that it would be at 1.83% of the total allowable and 0.093% for the first location, which is the one on Kenworth Street. There's also a mathematical model for each one with similar determinations. So not only would these be compliant, they would be extremely compliant and almost not measurable as far as the exposure level. So what we've done, I think, in the report is certify compliance as required by the FCC.
Anybody else here? Questions?
Yes, thank you. My name is Eugene Hunt, my wife Margaret. We live at 32 Harvard Street, 28 Harvard Street. Actually, I thought I might be dealing with a simpler problem. I didn't know that we had the opportunity to assist Verizon and to eliminate floodway for the town by taking it on ourselves. If I thought I might be able to better serve the board by our request on the part of the board is that you deny this request for number 32 Harvard. I likewise have put some pictures in
Thank you.
the back of the document. The first picture, if I might ask you to take a look at it, is a view from our stairway to our deck. And if I understood council correctly, the unit's going to go on the top of that pole. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So it will be as high as it is there, but then on top of it. Just in case there's a consideration from the board, Mr. Chairman, I believe at the beginning of the session, when you were reading, you mentioned that Harvard Street was a public way?
No,
private.
private.
Private, but in your document that you sent out, it has public.
In what document?
The notice to the letters.
The notice to the voters had it mentioned as a public way.
As a public way.
However, it's, we're noting right now.
Okay, for the record, we're noting that it's a private way.
Okay. It's a private
Good.
way.
So I think so we are asking the board to deny the request. The last picture in that group of pictures, you'll see a car at the end of the old, there is a fire station in Humrock there. 911 was mentioned as a consideration for Verizon. And public safety is mentioned. And I'm sure that the fire station this time has a facility to handle its needs. And I wonder, in fact, if we're going to be putting small towers, if that 100 yards further inland might not accommodate that. This area of Scituate was recently designated in the high-risk category of the federal floodplain. Number 32, Harvard Street, is an oceanfront home. Now, the pole you see in the unit that's going to go on top of that is higher than number 32, Harvard Street, which is a large old Victorian colonial. So we are right near the water there. About from that pole, maybe 20 feet, there's a seawall. The water regularly comes over during the winter time. So we have a beachfront property. That pole is right behind the house that's on the water, an area that does flood. And you have a pole now that's going to go up the distance that you see there. So the real question, and the other pictures seek to just give you a different view from around our house and around that property. So we asked the board to deny this request. I think that if they are, I mean, it would be hard, I understand their attempt to just distribute cell power, but I'm really hard to understand why it ends up on near the ocean in Humrock, up in the air from the winds from an area that's been designated high-risk flood zone on the part of the federal government. So we're here to ask the board to deny the request for number 32 Harvard Street. Any questions?
But the pole would remain as it is. Let's just assume that the request was denied. It'd still be that high, correct?
No, the original pole is the small one.
But
They've already replaced it.
they've already replaced it, though, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Well, that's one of our key considerations, which were put in the letter, is that as I understand the request to you, is that there should be a replacement pole. That's more than a replacement pole. And the other further information in that letter is that when that pole was put in the ground, a neighbor nearby, and they wrote that this is subjective, it will need to be put under oath. A neighbor nearby asked those who were installing the pole, why so tall, why so big, why so wide? He said, because we're going to install a cell tower on it. And that was last March, long before they came to the board for approval. So I would submit to you that the replacement pole that was put in was not to replace the wires. That replacement pole that was put in specifically for the purpose of putting a cell tower on it, in my judgment, predetermining that you were going to approve it. Outside of the process, we would say outside of the appropriate due process. That pole was put on the ground in March. So.
And it's kind of hard from these pictures to note, are the wires hooked up to the new pole?
During the summer, they hooked up part of the wires to the new pole, but not all of them.
It's like the top ones to the new pole, right? The bottom ones are to
Yeah, I mean, one key part of our point of view is that they have assumptively gone forward, putting in a pole in the ground, and identifying for those workers who were putting it on the ground, they were putting a cell tower up there, long before they came to this board for approval. And yes, that happened last March, and during the summer, they did hook up some of the wires. But we seek to capture in the letter there a group of things that I think are important for the board to be aware of, and including the pictures, which is intended to give you an idea of how close to the ocean it is. And it's right, the seawall is right beyond number 32, and at least during the winter now, it floods 2 or 3 times over the wall.
To your knowledge, who installed the other pole?
It was just I don't know is the answer, a truck, and I didn't get from there, but that's why part of my request there is that you do request or demand of the applicant that they give us the truck number, the workers who installed it, as well as their personnel number, because at some point in time, we may need to put them on the roof. Our judgment is it was predetermined to put a cell tower on that pole as far back as March.
Plus, it's a coordinated effort. It's probably owned by the electric company.
Right, National Grid.
So they probably put the pole in,
Mhm.
but they would have to know that Verizon wanted to put a cell tower on it.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed.
But my question, I guess, to the board would be, is there any regulation, I'm just assuming it's National Grid, but could National Grid place a pole with that height anyway? Let's say they weren't gonna do a cell tower, like, meaning that, do we have the jurisdiction to say, remove that tower and keep the smaller one?
No, you
Yeah.
may not have that, you may not have that authority. Poles are governed by the FCC, as town council has advised me. And so, if you have any doubt in your mind tonight, you need to continue this public hearing. And we would need to bring the matter back to town council, because the FCC, under certain of these regulations, has authority over the poles.
If I may. Yes, they do. An alternate point of view is they can replace the pole that is there. They cannot necessarily replace it with a pole that they put in the ground. I realize that, so that's odd,
And so I have town council looking into that matter
Yeah.
right now, so
Sure.
if you have any question, we need to continue.
Shall we?
Yeah, I think
I'll
so.
make a
I mean,
motion.
if this is still an open issue, then we should wait to get the answer on this.
I'll make a motion to continue this public hearing to 3
Well-
public hearings
Well,
Is it,
running consecutively.
can we clarify? I mean,
well, this is the Harvard Street.
All right. Do we
This
want
is
to-
Harvard Street one, right? What about the other two? Where are the photos for the other two? Are there new poles there as well?
I think it was just for the one
I
on
think it was just the one that I saw
Kenworth.
today. I mean, this is the one at Kenilworth, which.
That's
I
a new
took the
pole.
picture today.
That's a new pole, isn't it?
Yep.
yes.
Took the picture today, and this is the one on Allen Street that I took the picture.
That looks like a new pole, too.
Today,
Yeah, it looks pretty tall, too.
so.
So I think we should get the answer to this. It may be that we don't have any say in whether the utility can put any pole they want to put in there.
You know, how come sometimes at selectmen's
I mean,
meetings,
our
National Grid will come in or Verizon will come in, and they'll come in about replacing a pole, and there will be a hearing in front of the Board of Selectmen.
well, I think there's actually, it's in the zoning bylaws, right? About replacing utility poles, right? I thought.
They generally, if I may, it is a replacement of light for light.
But there was an issue over on, I believe, Damon Lane or one of the little side streets up in Minot, where they wanted to move a pole and put it in someone's front yard. And it was a little bit of a kerfuffle. So,
Can I just say I have town council looking into this?
all right,
and,
then.
Maybe we should, if you don't feel comfortable, then we should continue.
All of them?
That's up to you. I mean,
Well,
all I know is that
I'm
the
looking at
application
just
says it's gonna be a 40
photographic
foot
evidence and
pole.
trying to make a determination, and it looks like at least 2 of them are
So-
Brand
big,
new.
tall, new poles. I
Right.
can't tell about Allen Place, but.
But there are 2 questions, the size of the pole, which is question 1, and then the approval of putting these cell towers on it, just confirming that.
Well, that's what we're here for now, right? What we're talking about is trying to make sure we have all of the information before we make a decision. And I think what we would like to do is, well, you have a proposed motion.
Move to continue the 3 public hearings for the small cell attachments adjacent to 14 Allen Place to 26 Kenilworth Drive and 32 Harvard Street until October 26, 2017 at 7 p.m. and continue the time for action until November 30th, 2017.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Let's hear back from town council on that.
So you want more information from the applicant as well?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to actually say that. That will make any sense to Verizon.
Well,
I mean, I would like to understand how, they said that it's inadequate coverage and capacity for these 3 locations. And I guess I would like to understand how they made that determination in the context of the overall service of Scituate. And
in layman's terms.
well, I think what I've read here is that the radio frequency engineer said things like Verizon Wireless has identified a need, right? And in fact, that the wireless service needs significant improvement. So he's stating those things. I guess I would like evidence of that need and how they got to the determination of that need. And it seems like our bylaws are sort of designed to say that at least we should understand that. So that's what I'm asking. I don't actually know what that looks like in terms of data or computer models or anything like that, but as you suggest, they probably know everything that's happening with their system on a minute-to-minute basis. So is there a way to sort of demonstrate how they determined that that need and capacity limitation exists? Other than somebody says the need and the capacity limitation exists.
If memory serves me right, they showed capacity and coverage areas that were existing and to be improved when they put the cell tower in over by the fire station.
Well, they showed sector footprints in different colors. And they showed cell towers.
That doesn't give you a sense of strength, it just gives you
No, it doesn't tell me
where the coverage is sourced from.
Yeah, exactly. So what I'm trying to understand is how did we pick these areas, and that, how do you determine that is? Is it, the everywhere else except within a 1 mile radius, the drop call average is 100% of what a normal, I don't actually know, right? Because I'm like Ben. I probably know less than Ben about LTE coverage and stuff. So
I don't know much.
But what we're charged with doing is understanding that coverage need. And I understand that somebody has signed a piece of paper that says there's a need, but can you help us out with like understanding how you determined that need and maybe where other needs might be in the town of Scituate as well? and
No,
what
we
might
will
be
certainly
coming.
work to clarify that for the next meeting.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, is it appropriate to also ask them alternate spots for these things? Why on the ocean front in Humrock versus on the fire station?
I think that's an excellent question, and that would be another piece of follow-up that would be interesting to know. So you've got it here located in a particular location on Humrock Beach or on Allen Street or whatever. Why not the next pole down, or why not the next pole over, or why that location in particular?
Okay.
Is it just, sort of pick a pole, or is it, this is the optimal location,
So
right?
they conveniently found a taller pole right next to the original. It's purely coincidental.
Maybe that is the answer. I'm not telling you what the answer is. I just would like to, I think that's a good question, and we should probably hear that as well.
Okay.
And maybe that means our radio frequency engineer needs to be here the next time. I don't know. I'll let you figure out how you'll deliver that information back to us.
Okay.
I just have a
Thank you.
comment.
Yes.
I have 5 children with spouses.
Could you just identify yourself?
Oh, Margaret Hunt, 28 Harvard.
Thank you.
I have 5 children with spouses and 9 grandchildren. We have never had a problem with the cell phone down at our house in our district.
Yeah.
We have never had a problem.
I hear you. I'd like to see, and I'm sure Verizon has data everywhere for every house over there, every service. And so they must have a way of determining that they have limited capacity here. That we're just trying to understand that. Okay.
All right, well, thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Take care.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure when we put the cell tower in, they showed us both coverage and capacity.
That's what I would have thought. It seems like I guarantee it's out there. It's just.
What's happening with the pole on Tilden Road?
I have no idea.
Well, there's no top on it.
That's on private property, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what to do.
Yeah, but it's still federal, under federal.
The reason we're in this pickle, and I know Ann agrees with me, we shouldn't have utility poles to begin with, but we do. If
It should all be underground.
If there's some way that we can.
They will all be underwater at some point.
Not in New England, I don't.
I think you go over
Above ground poles might actually be better in certain places.
I don't know,
than
you go
below
over to
ground.
Europe and it's like visually, like it's so
That's Europe.
non-cluttered
We
compared
can
to
sit
here.
on top of it at high tide.
Okay, we're moving on.
Moving on, so we can move out.
How about accounting? You ready to do accounting? Sorry for prolonging this, but I'm just trying to understand this.
That's why we're continuing it.
You're
so you
welcome.
can understand it.
Okay, we have some accounting here. Move to improve invoiced on October 12th for Chesia Consulting Services for construction inspections at 50 Country Way for $840. Move to improve invoice dated October 2nd, 2017 to WB Mason Company for office supplies in the amount of $20.49. Move to approve invoice dated October 2nd, 2017 to Amory Engineers for construction inspections at 9397 First Parish Road in the amount of $515.10. Move to approve invoice from Amory Engineers dated October 2nd, 2017 for construction inspections at 13 Ford Place in the amount of $357.84. And lastly, move to approve invoice from Merrill Corporation dated October 2nd, 2017 for engineering peer review for 529 to 531 Country Way Common Driveway in the amount of $585.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Okay, we're done there. We don't have any minutes.
Want to find those minutes.
You voted for it. Liaison reports?
EDC met last night. We had a really, really good meeting, and we're going forward as we had discussed it at the last planning board meeting. Ted Robitz is, and I think he's on the upcoming agenda with us at some point.
He was going to give us like monthly updates or something.
Okay, October
Good.
26th. And we're going forward with trying to figure out what the Drew project and where that's going to be.
Mhm.
So it was a really, really good meeting. We have a great group.
Good.
Excellent group.
Good. Well, we'll be interested to hear the feedback. I assume you're looking at, are you looking at the actual development itself in terms of how it meets kind of the vision on the overall
Yes.
development?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
And at the end, at the back end of that, we're looking at that parcel for a potential 40R. You know, we're gonna have all the design. That was one of the things that we had talked about even last year,
Mhm.
and which is to get the design.
We got to get the infrastructure.
I know that, but we have to start
That's what held us
working
up
on it.
before.
Right. And let's see.
On EDC, just a quick question. Is there any talk about, and this was done, I know, we talked about a couple of years ago, about an RFP for like the golf course, like a hotel or a boutique conference center. That was discussed multiple times.
It
I
was
know.
discussed
It came
multiple.
up recently on Facebook, that's why I
Oh,
asked.
well, because, whatever. We won't go down that particular road. But, no, it's, somebody's out there.
I know, but it's a good idea, I think.
Well, we had an opportunity, excuse me, Steve, with basically a campus situation in conjunction with Massasoit. The RFP was kind of screwed up, so it didn't go anywhere, but it would have been classrooms, marine,
Right.
what have you, a conference center, et cetera, and that went south on that parcel on the Driftway.
And
The answer
what
is-
Ted's working on is really sort of the framework
Yes.
for the overall sort of development of that whole business district there, so that we get sort of consistent set of standards, architectural streetscape standards, those kinds of things, which I think we really want to do as
Absolutely.
these things start to develop like this.
Well, and also you're going to see, as was pointed out, the transfer station is really way too big for what it does. And that's a prime piece of real estate. And then two, as was discussed last night, we've got Scituate concrete pipe, and if the money is right, he's got property elsewhere, who is to say? And the goal is, well, in terms of economic development and in terms of planning, let's get some of this in place so that when it does happen, we have control over it rather than being reactive, which we are all too often.
Yeah, well, I think the Drew development gives us a perfect opportunity to
Yes.
sort of dovetail it
Yep.
together.
It does.
Okay. Planning development report?
Yes. Certificates of occupancy were issued for the brewery and for First Parish
Excellent.
Road.
Did anyone go last night?
I did.
I don't know how many people went to the brewery last night.
It was
I
great.
just got notified too late.
No, it was great.
Change things.
We have a project called the Riverway that was done under a planned development district.
Mhm.
That's been, quote, they built out all the units. And
They still owe us commercial
they
property,
still own
right?
a mixed-use building with 2 affordable units in it. This building, quote, the rights to develop it have been for sale for 3 years. I've had one developer request all the information, and he says it's not economical to build by somebody other than the original developer unless there's changed conditions. And so,
What's the original developer doing? He's the one who has the responsibility to build it, right?
that's correct. So the question is, what does the board want to do? Do we want to start hauling in the original developer, or are you willing to listen to any type of modification of the, of potentially the affordable units?
And when you say modification, what are they indicating the modification needs to be?
Maybe semi-quasi affordable, not, it wouldn't meet the standardized list.
So we wouldn't end up getting any affordable housing out of this development.
Right, we wouldn't get anything that we could count on our subsidized housing inventory.
Seems like we ought to have the original
That's the
developer.
price we got for approving the development.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's in violation of his,
Right, so you would like me to draft a letter?
Yeah,
and
invite him
try
to be-
Invite him to be at a specific meeting, not to be abated from, which he has done
I
multiple times. in the
think
past.
Laura tried for years to get him in here, right?
Well, he was in here at one point in time and said they were gonna build it in the next X
2
number of
years.
months, right?
This is within 2 years.
Yeah.
and how long ago was that?
So we've missed our 2-year window?
We missed
All right.
the 2-year window.
Let's have him come in and talk to us again.
Okay. All right, so I will work on that, and I gave you a timeline for zoning, so you
Yes.
get an idea of
It's pretty tight.
the tightness of
Yeah.
trying to get some type of Greenbush zoning done for the spring town meeting.
I looked at it, did you guys have a chance to look at it? It felt to me like we were gonna be pushing uphill to try to get that done.
Like Ann said, Ted Brovitz will be here on next meeting.
Let's see how it goes with that.
Scheduled for, I am blocking him in for time on November, but we had hoped to just cancel one of the meetings in December.
Mhm.
So you have to decide how that.
Let's get an update from him. You know, at some point, we need to see even sort of what's recommended for zoning changes and collaborate with them on what we think the appropriate language changes might be here, but perhaps we'll get that at the next meeting.
Right, because public workshops would need to be basically
Right.
in January, because you'd have to have your public hearings in February, because I'm assuming the advisory committee likes to know the final language, that the planning boards have their public hearings prior to them actually having to make a recommendation for the booklet for town meeting.
Okay. Does he know this? Did you send him a copy of that timeline? Or maybe Ann, you can
I'll
make
send
sure he
it to
gets it?
him.
Yeah.
We can make sure he gets it.
Yeah. Any update on the master plan conversations at all?
Not since we met last.
Okay.
But just trying to talk to staff here and other folks to get an idea of the type of consultant we might want to look for. So I'm really trying to, prior to us officially starting any process, we'd like to do kind of informal interviews with folks to
Yeah.
get kind of a short list of folks that we probably...
Get a sense of who could really support us and how much it might cost. Yeah. Okay. And Karen, this is just a conversation we started, I guess, the last meeting, right?
Yes.
About the master plans, 13, 14 years old now. And it's really time to take the initiative to do an update to that master plan. And Brad was good enough to, along with Karen, to sort of put together an outline of the process, and we're trying to figure that out right now. You know, how long it might take, how much it might cost, all of that. And you know, it's a conversation we'll want to have with the Board of Selectmen once we have sort of the ducks in a row, I guess.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Might have mentioned it in the last couple of months.
What's that?
I might have mentioned it in the last couple of months.
I think you did.
Well, you know, we're in a lot better shape than a lot of towns in terms of,
Absolutely.
you know, the age of our master plan, but it does still talk about the trains coming to town, so. Anything else?
Oh, I saw the date for the fall town meeting was, I believe, November 14th. I'm gonna be gone for that. Not that that may impact, but sometimes you do have a planning board meeting.
Yeah, we'll
that-
schedule one ahead of time,
evening.
just in case, right? Or be
So-
there, just in case, right? I don't know that we'll need to do anything, so,
But just to let you know.
okay. All right, then I'm entertaining Bill's motion.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.